Chapter 625. With the death of the Dragonborn Pirate King, the remaining pirates completely lost their will to fight and no longer had any thoughts of resistance. The entire battlefield was filled with their fleeing figures. But where could they run to on the surface of the sea? With the red dragon Onyx patrolling back and forth in the sky and a mutant tiger shark eyeing them covetously in the sea, these pirates had long since lost the chance to escape. In the end, these pirates could only throw down their weapons and surrender in order to survive. The battle ended quickly, and Barbossa was already very familiar with cleaning up the battlefield and settling the captives. However, things were not over yet. After defeating the Dragonborn Pirate King, they still had to receive the spoils of war and retrieve Sullen's goods. Escorting the surrendered pirates and the captured pirate ships, the entire fleet had a total of 18 ships. They then majestically moved towards Shipwreck Harbor. Seeing the fleet approaching, the pirates left behind in Shipwreck Harbor did not have the slightest thought of resisting and directly threw down their weapons and surrendered. As for those who wanted to resist, after seeing the red dragon hovering in the sky, they directly threw down their weapons and wanted to escape. The appearance of the red dragon caused the entire Shipwreck Harbor to become chaotic. In almost all worlds, the red dragon represented disaster. Every time it appeared, it would be accompanied by a large amount of destruction. Almost every red dragon in the material world had robbed a city or a king. The mountain of wealth in the red dragon lair had basically come from this. Moreover, there was still the red dragon queen in the southern seas. She was the true ruler of the southern seas. Now that the red dragon had suddenly appeared here, could it be related to her? Many people with active minds were secretly wondering if she wanted to take control of this place as well. Arriving at Shipwreck Harbor again, the feeling this time was particularly different. Su Len looked at the flustered Shipwreck Harbor and frowned slightly. He then waved his hand, and Barbossa immediately led the soldiers of Deepwater City to start maintaining order. Very quickly, under the influence of Barbossa and the navy of Deepwater City, the originally chaotic harbor was quickly restored to order. Where is Norland's lair? Su Len waved his hand, and several pirate leaders under the Dragonborn Pirate King Norland immediately stepped forward to answer. Your Grace, Norland's lair is in the Crystal Palace behind the harbor. Almost all of Norland's wealth is gathered there. Send someone to load all the wealth onto the ship, Su Len said directly. He was here to rob. After defeating the Dragonborn Pirate King, Shipwreck Harbor was like a weak woman who had lost all ability to resist. It could only wail under the tyrannical Su Len. Su Len did not show any mercy to these pirates. His fleet had almost been completely wiped out. He had spent so much time and effort to build the fleet, and after a few voyages, more than half of them had been killed by the pirates. The pirates of this era were not like the Captain Jack in the movies and novels. These pirates could be said to be committing all kinds of crimes. Murder and arson were the most basic of their crimes. These pirates robbed and killed. Forcing captives to jump off the deck into the sea was a common occurrence. It could be said that these pirates should all be hanged according to the law. Under Sullen's order, the soldiers of Deepwater City immediately began to collect the spoils of war. Su Len and his men were not familiar with Shipwreck Harbor, but the pirate captives were. These pirates were very skilled in treachery. They led the soldiers of Deepwater City to rummage through the city's wealth and send it to the ships docked at the harbor. Apart from the pirates, the richest people in Shipwreck Harbor were the black market merchants. These people could be said to be extremely daring, selling their souls for profit. As long as there were benefits, these merchants dared to trade with the devil. All kinds of goods stolen by the pirates were sold by them, and each of them could be said to be overflowing with wealth. Su Len naturally did not intend to let these merchants go. Carlos, take your men and let these captives lead the way. Go and catch the black market merchants for me. Also, find out how much money these merchants have and bring it to me, Su Luen said to a marine admiral who had just been promoted by him. Yes, Your Grace. After saying that, he bowed and led a group of soldiers and a few surrendered pirates to capture the black market merchants. Shipwreck Harbor was the largest port among the pirates, and the wealth here was astonishing. Soon, boxes of kinnar were transported over. Your Grace, the wealth left behind by Norland is astonishing. According to our preliminary estimates, there are at least 1.5 million kinnar, including a large number of gems, precious utensils, and so on. If all of them are converted, it's estimated to be more than 3 million kinnar, Barbossa said excitedly. 3 million kinnar. Su Len could not help but rub his hands. His northern city could be considered to be making a lot of money every day. Sugar, rum, paper, perfume, excellent weapons, and so on, all of these things added up to only a little more than 1,000,000 kinner a year. After all kinds of expenses, there was not much left. He had only killed one pirate king, but there was actually so much wealth. Su Len immediately wondered if he should kill the other pirate kings as well. However, the other pirate kings did not provoke him. It would not be good to kill them directly. Moreover, these pirate kings also had other forces behind them. If he really did that, it was estimated that the entire southern waters would not do business with him. After thinking about it, Su Len temporarily put aside this tempting idea. "Load all these things onto the ship," Su Len said. 1 or 2 million kinner were piled up like a small mountain, but the ship Su Len brought could easily fit them. Norland is really a good person. Looking at the wealth piled up in front of him, Su Len kept sighing in his heart. In addition to the gold, Norland also sent a large number of pirate slaves, experience, and treasure chests to Su Len. He was just like a child of wealth. For such a child of wealth, Su Len felt that the more the better. It was not easy to build a floating space city. The cost of building a floating space tower had already cost tens of millions of kinner, and to build a floating space city, it would cost at least billions of kinner. Fortunately, Sullen's territory was rich in minerals, and many things could be mined on their own, which saved a lot of expenses. A wizard tower was more than 1,000,000 tons, and the floating space city was at least 10 times larger than the wizard tower. Its weight was at least hundreds of millions of tons. Even if such a behemoth was all made of ordinary steel, it would still be an amazing number if converted to kinner, not to mention that the main body of the city was obsidian. Chapter 626. Your Excellency the Grand Duke, Your Excellency the Grand Duke, please listen to my explanation. We are honorable merchants. A fat merchant shouted in a panic. Grand Duke, I went to the northern city to give you gifts this year. Please listen to my explanation. I really don't have any money. I just want to earn some hard-earned money. The merchant tried to rush over, but he was very polite. The guard beside him pushed him back and squatted on the ground. Even so, he did not give up struggling. Honest merchant? Su Len glanced at the crying merchant. This guy was wearing a linen shirt. The shirt had been starched until it was a little white. There were even a few patches on it. However, when the guard beside him was tearing it, he tore a hole in his shirt and the silk underwear inside instantly leaked out. Hard-earned money? Su Len looked at him. He could afford silk underwear, but he said he didn't have any money? Carlos, how much money did you find with him? Grand Duke, we searched through his place and only found a few hundred kinner. Carlos said shamefully when he saw the other people transporting boxes of gold and silver. A few hundred kinner? Su Len raised his eyebrows. Grand Duke, don't believe his plan. This guy is called Gretel. He is the biggest black market merchant in our shipwreck harbor. Every year, he handles at least a few 100,000 kinner, a pirate beside him suddenly said. A few 100,000 kinner? Su Len looked at Gretel. A few 100,000 kinner, and you say you don't have any money? Grand Duke, it's not just that. The pirates here sell him goods at 30% of the original value. He makes even more after selling these goods. Did you hear that? These pirates are very clear about your income. Su Len said to Gretel. Do you want to hand over the money yourself, or do you want to wait for them to treat you well before handing over the money? Grand Duke, you can't just listen to the words of these pirates. These pirates are treacherous. They commit all kinds of crimes, murder and arson. They are framing me. Gretel argued loudly. You don't want to admit it. Su Len looked at Gretel. He didn't expect Gretel to still be so stubborn even at this point. He really doesn't shed tears until he sees the coffin. But I like this kind of stubborn person. Greg, you don't have to deny it. Since we're already here, it's impossible for us not to bleed. My goods were stolen, and the pirates who robbed me have already paid the price. However, you accomplices haven't. It's not like we're going to make you bankrupt today. You, Gretel, earn at least a few 100,000 kinner a year here. There's also your fleet and caravan. I'm not sure how much you earn each year. Then let's take a year's worth of your earnings. You've been earning money here for more than a decade. It's not too much to ask for a year's worth of compensation, right? It's not just you. We'll use the same standard for the other black market merchants. You earn 4 to 500,000 kinner a year here. Let's make it 500,000 kinner. Gretel, take out 500,000 kinner and I'll pretend nothing happened. You can continue to be a black market merchant here, and I'll take the money back to Northern Town. 500,000 kinner. That's just a year's worth of your earnings here. It's not too much to ask for, right? Take it out and I'll let you go. I'll also guarantee your safety. If you can't take it out. Sulen lifted Gretel up and smiled at him. He then waved at the soldiers beside him. Then I won't be the one to talk to you. I'll need my men to talk to you. He shouted at the soldiers beside him. What do you think? How do you plan to talk to him? Sulen asked. The soldiers looked at each other. They didn't seem to know how to talk. Why don't we talk to him on the wooden spikes? One of the soldiers suggested. Let's go with the wooden spikes. The other soldiers responded. Gretel, who was being held up by a few soldiers, turned pale instantly. No, wooden spikes won't work. Sulen shook his head. He wouldn't survive a 2-meter-long wooden spike piercing through his body. Gretel heaved a sigh of relief when he heard Sulen's words. However, before he could finish his sigh of relief, Sulen said again, since wooden spikes won't work, let's use the wooden spikes instead. That's good. As long as you control your strength, you won't have to worry about killing him. Let's use the wooden spikes. We should use the wooden spikes to deal with these unscrupulous merchants. The soldiers shouted when they heard Sulen's words. Sulen turned around calmly and waved at the soldiers beside him. Go, treat our old friend Gretel well. Otherwise, people will say that we're rude. Understood. We'll treat our old friend well. The soldiers around him laughed. Your Excellency, Your Excellency, Your Excellency, please spare my life. Gretel's expression changed when he heard Sulen's words. He cried and tried to pull Sulen away, but the soldier beside him kicked him to the ground. Sulen ignored Gretel. This guy was wearing an old shirt and saying that he had no money. Did he think that he was blind? He had already given him a chance, but he didn't even know how to grasp it. He had earned so much money as a black market merchant over the years. It could be said that every kinnar was stained with blood. Sulen didn't want their lives. He just wanted them to hand over a year's worth of income. It was too easy for them. Sulen asked the soldiers to find a chair and sat on it. He then waved at the soldiers beside him and signaled for them to continue. Your Excellency, we don't have wooden spikes on our ship, a soldier beside him said. Sulen rolled his eyes and said, we don't have wooden spikes, but what about the pirates? Don't they have any in the pirates' prison? We just can't find any. Ask the pirates to make a few. Yes, Your Excellency. The soldier immediately went to carry out the order. There was also a prison in Shipwreck Bay. It was used to imprison pirates who broke the rules. There were all kinds of torture tools in the prison. Soon, a few pirates brought the torture tools over. Gretel's face turned pale when he saw the blood-stained torture tools. Then, a few soldiers forced him to wear the spikes. Your Excellency, Your Excellency, I'll donate. Please ask them to stop. Gretel shouted when he saw that they were serious. Wouldn't it be better if you cooperated earlier? Sulen put down his teacup and smiled. But since you've already brought the spikes, it's not good to just take them off. It's better to let Gretel experience our service. He waved at the soldiers and 2 of them immediately pulled the spikes down. Chapter 627. Amid a series of hysterical screams, Gretel was pinched so hard that he almost died. Finally, after a round of pinching, the soldiers around him finally let him go. Lord Duke, please spare my life. I'll donate. Gretel screamed as he begged for donations. His voice was like a cuckoo crying blood. It was heart-wrenching and tearful. Lord Duke, I'm willing to donate 500,000 kinner to make up for your loss, Gretel said without hesitation. That's more like it. Sulen nodded in satisfaction. Mr. Gretel is a good man to be willing to donate 500,000 kinner. You are indeed a friend of Beifeng Principality. Quick. What are you doing? Mr. Gretel fell down. Why didn't you help him up? You didn't even know how to control your strength. Sulen reprimanded the soldiers around him. Hurry up and help Mr. Gretel up. A few soldiers immediately went up to Gretel with smiles on their faces and tried to help him up by his arms. "It's not your fault. I lost my balance and fell down. I fell down," Gretel quickly explained. "If that's the case, Mr. Gretel, please hand over the kinner that you donated." Sulen nodded. 500,000 kinner is not too much, is it? Not at all, not at all. I'm willing to donate this to Beifeng Principality. Soon, a group of soldiers followed Gretel to an ordinary-looking house. They then opened the cellar in a hidden corner of the house and took out the kinnar that was stored inside. After a while, a caravan carrying 500,000 kinnar slowly walked out. A caravan was needed to carry all these kinnar. Each kinnar weighed 4 grams. 80% of it was gold while the rest was made up of other metals. 500,000 kinnar weighed about 2 tons. It would take 10 caravans to transport all of them. Fortunately, these merchants had prepared a large number of caravans to transport the goods. Each caravan carried a few hundred pounds of kinnar. These kinnar were all packed in boxes. In order to make it easier to transport, each box weighed 100 pounds. There were exactly 4 boxes in a caravan. There were a total of 10 caravans in a row. With Gretel as a demonstration, dealing with the other black market merchants was a walk in the park. After sending kinnar to the port, Sulen waved his hand and said, "Mr. Gretel has donated everything. I'll leave the rest to you." Gretel donated 500,000 kinnar, but he is the biggest businessman in Shipwreck Harbor. The other businessmen have smaller businesses than him, so 500,000 kinnar is a bit too much. We have to calculate his annual income first, and then collect the compensation according to his annual income. Your Excellency, these merchants are used to cheating. If they hide their income, we won't know either. Carlos asked. That's easy. Although we don't know, someone else does. Sulen pointed at the pirates and said, "These pirates have been living here for a long time. Although they don't know the exact income of these merchants, they know all the warehouses and shops. It's enough to calculate. Besides, don't we have an expert here? I'll ask Mr. Gretel to help me calculate it. It'll definitely be accurate." Sulen patted Gretel's shoulder and said, "I'm sure Mr. Gretel will help us with this small matter." "Yes, Your Excellency, I'll definitely help you," Gretel said loudly. "Hurry up and call some of the pirates here. Let them help with the calculation." Sulen waved his hand and said to Carlos. The pirates were very happy to report these black market merchants. After all, these black market merchants opened all kinds of casinos, brothels, and taverns in Shipwreck Harbor and made a lot of money from them. Soon, another black market merchant was brought over by the soldiers. When he saw Sulen, he immediately said, "Your Excellency, it must have been hard on you. I'm willing to give you 5,000 kinnar for a cup of tea." You're quite smart." Sulen looked at the black market merchant in front of him with a smile. "But 5,000 kinnar is too stingy. Look, Gretel. He donated 500,000 kinnar. You're still far from it." Sulen shook his head with a look of regret. 500,000 kinnar? The black market merchant was so surprised that he couldn't close his mouth. "Yes, 500,000 kinnar." Sulen nodded. "However, I won't force you to donate as much as you want. It's all up to you. If you want to be friends with us, then donate more. If you don't want to, then it doesn't matter," Sulen said generously as he patted the black market merchant's shoulder. Just as Sulen was speaking, a few soldiers beside him brought over the prepared pincers. These pincers from the prison were stained with blood and looked a little dirty. Pincers were considered the lightest punishment in the pirates' prison. The pincers were made of 3 pieces of wood that were then strung together with iron bars. Grooves were dug in the middle of the wood. These grooves were where the ankles were placed and were strung together with ropes. When it was used, the prisoner's feet would be placed in the grooves. Then, 2 other people would pull the rope and tighten it. If they were lucky, they would make a frame for the prisoner to lie down. If they were in a bad mood, they would make the prisoner kneel on the ground and torture him. This kind of torture device depended on the size of the opening at the ankles. If the opening was too big, it wouldn't even clamp the ankles. The pincers that the pirates had prepared only had a shallow groove. It didn't feel good to be clamped. In fact, there were 2 other types of pincers. One used sticks as thick as chopsticks that were strung together in a row. This was specially used to clamp fingers. The most ruthless pincers were specially used to clamp the head. This kind of torture device could even crack a person's skull. How could Su Len use such inhumane torture devices?
Your Excellency the Grand Duke, Your Excellency the Grand Duke, I really don't have that much money.
A black market merchant screamed. Then, he was grabbed by a few ferocious soldiers as if they were grabbing a chick. Then, they forcefully put torture equipment on him. You dog! You still want to lie to Your Excellency the Grand Duke? A pirate next to him went up and kicked him. You dog! You opened a casino here. You make money like water every day. I alone lose dozens of kinnar in the casino every day. But your casino has at least thousands of customers every day. How much money do you make? This black market merchant was also raised to be a respectable person. When had he ever been treated like this? Garrett, it seems like our merchant doesn't intend to tell the truth. Calculate for him. We're not pirates, we're regular navies. We do things based on evidence and reason.
Su Len waved at Garrett, who was beside him.
Garrett, who had become a lackey, immediately calculated according to the description of the pirates. It didn't take much effort for him to calculate the black market merchant's annual income. Chapter 628. The casino's daily income is about 3,000 kinnar, but this money needs to be shared with the other pirate kings. In the end, 500 kinnar will fall into his hands, which is about 100,000 kinnar a year. Also, the J Court and the tavern in his hands are also making a lot of money every day. In this way, his annual income is at least 450,000 kinnar. Gretel added up all the income and quickly came up with the annual income of this black market merchant.
There are some miscellaneous things, which is about 10,000 to 20,000 kinnar.
In that case, let's not be so calculative. Let's calculate according to 450,000. Su Len directly made the decision. Gretel's calculation was indeed accurate. This black market merchant's annual income was indeed more than 450,000 kinnar, but the more he earned, the more he spent. He needed to maintain the fleet, various fighters, guards, and so on. The expenses were not small, but 450,000 kinnar was definitely something he could afford. Carlotte, I'll leave this to you. Treat him well. Hee. Don't say that we're making things difficult for you. Today, no one will be able to escape. You have to take the 450,000 gold coins, even if you don't want to. Now, let us brothers serve you well. Carlotte grinned, revealing a row of white teeth. Your Excellency Grand Duke, I really didn't earn that much money. That money is from the shares of the various pirate kings. I'm just a puppet on the table. I really don't have any money. The black market merchant cried out. Su Len waved his hand and said, People's hearts are sinister, especially in this kind of pirate den. Do you think I dare to believe you? In comparison, I believe in the trap more. Come on, this is a lie detector. As long as you can pass the lie detector, I'll believe you.
As he spoke, a few soldiers beside him carried up the lie detector that they had prepared beforehand.
Then, they directly propped up the black market merchants. The lie detector made of iron oak was hard and durable. Su Len was considerate enough to prepare a bench for the merchants to lie down on during the test. Come, let's try it first. Carlotte directly put the trap on the black market merchant, and then the two soldiers immediately grabbed the rope and exerted force. Ah! The black market merchant immediately let out a heart-wrenching scream. His whole face was red, and the veins on his forehead were bulging. His two arms struggled to escape, but he was firmly pressed on the bench by the soldiers. His body twisted back and forth like a worm, but there was no effect. This is just the beginning. The rope is just the most basic. A few soldiers tied the trap tightly, and then stuffed the prepared wooden wedges in to compress the gap. Okay, let's officially start. One of the soldiers stood up, picked up a wooden mallet and said, Remember, if you agree, say it quickly. Otherwise it will be too late. Start the polygraph. Carlos shouted. The two soldiers raised their mallets and slammed them down on the wooden wedge without hesitation. Ouch! A far cry from the black market merchant's voice. The black market merchant howled in agony. Even his eyes could be seen protruding out of their sockets. I'll donate money. 450,000 kinnar. The black market merchant could no longer care about anything else. Seeing that the two soldiers were about to hit him again, he quickly cried and shouted. Look, the lie detector is working again. Why is it so difficult to trust between people?
Su Len said bitterly.
I've already told you so earnestly, but you just don't want to tell me the truth.
Now, we've finally reached an agreement.
Then, the soldiers put the black market merchant down from the lie detector.
Then, they took the carriage that had just been unloaded and followed the black market merchant to his manor.
When the other black market merchants saw Sullen's actions, their faces turned ashen, as if they had lost their parents.
In the end, they all gave in.
One by one, they accepted Sullen's friendship and became friends with Bei Feng Duchy. They expressed that they were willing to donate all their income for a year to Bei Feng Duchy. Of course, Su Luan couldn't refuse the sincerity of these businessmen. Soon, a large number of kinnar was transported over. The 7 black market merchants donated more than 3 million kinnar to Su Len. In addition to the income of the Dragonborn Pirate King, just the kinnar alone gave Su Len at least tens of millions of kinnar. Sullen's first fund to build the floating city was finally settled. In addition to the kinnar, after killing the Dragonborn Pirate King, Su Len also received a lot of rewards. After dealing with the shipwreck harbor, Su Len had time to check the rewards. Congratulations, host. You have successfully killed a Dragonborn sea giant. You have received 53,400 experience points. You have received 1 legendary skill point. You have received 2 platinum treasure chests.
The battle is over.
You have received the item Sea Giant's Heart Blood *1. Rise of the Navy Legendary Battle. September 1689 of the Huiwe calendar. Due to the wealth of the deep-water port, it attracted the attention of others, leading to a pirate attack on the fleet. The newly born Huiwe port suffered huge losses. In order to take revenge, Su Len led the fleet to continue the counterattack. You have defeated the Black Shark Pirates, the One-Eyed Dragon Pirates, and successfully killed the Pirate King in the final battle. You have received a huge reputation in this battle. Reputation +5. Hearing the familiar voice, Su Len opened the storage space and took out the 2 platinum treasure chests. This Pirate King's strength is really weak. 2 platinum treasure chests. Not even a diamond.
I'll just make do with it.
Su Len took out the 2 platinum treasure chests from the storage space and chose to open them directly. After a flash of light, the system prompt sounded in Sullen's ear. Congratulations, host. You have successfully opened the platinum treasure chest. You have received the item Elemental Furnace Fuel. Congratulations, host. You have successfully opened the platinum treasure chest. You have received the item Legendary Soul Crystal. Su Len looked at the 2 items in front of him, the Elemental Furnace Fuel and the Soul Crystal. As the name suggested, the Elemental Furnace Fuel was used to burn the elemental furnace. This type of elemental furnace fuel was not produced much, and it would only appear occasionally in some mines. Although the elemental furnace fuel was less than 1.5 kilograms, it could be used for more than 15 years at full load if used in the elemental furnace. This was good news for Su Len. At least he did not have to look for elemental furnace fuel all over the world. As for the soul crystal, Su Len casually put it away. He planned to let Hathaway build a legendary golem construct with these soul crystals when he went back. A golem construct of this level was a true killer weapon. Chapter 629. The Tower of the North Wind now had several legendary golems, the most powerful of which was the Magic Breaker golem that Su Len had obtained from the ruins. The Magic Breaker statue was a special type of statue. If it had enough energy, it could possess the combat power of an advanced mythic. This was especially true for magic breakers like the Magic Breaker, which had very high magic resistance. The 2 Magic Breaker blades could even slice through advanced mythic magic barriers. The Magic Breaker was very fast and had a fast attack speed. Even legendary wizards could be killed if they were not careful. It could be said that this thing was completely developed to deal with wizards. Of course, the Magic Breaker was also very powerful against other classes. Its Magic Breaker blade was incomparably sharp, and its body of steel had shockingly high physical defense. It could be said that such a legendary magic puppet was a powerful killing machine. It had the attack power of a grand swordsman of the same level, but it did not have the weakness of a grand swordsman's low defense. If it were not for the expensive cost, it could almost be said to have no shortcomings. After Hathaway got the Magic Breaker golem, she deliberately checked its manufacturing process and the materials needed. Then she calculated that it would cost at least 200 million kinnar to build such a set of golems, And because it required a lot of very rare materials, many times it could not be made even if one had the money. High-level legendary golems were basically impossible to mass-produce. After all, there were too few materials that could be used to make high-level legendary golems. It was said that in the era of the Arcane Kingdom, there was a neutron star golem, which was known as the strongest golem. This golem's combat power was comparable to the gods, but it seemed that until the collapse of the Arcane Kingdom, the neutron star golem had not been successfully developed. When the Arcane Kingdom developed the neutron star golem, they used the gods as a reference, but before they could complete it, the Arcane Kingdom had collapsed. Hathaway had now made 2 diamond golems, which had a challenge rating of 21. It was the weakest of the legendary golems, but even the weakest golem was very powerful. In the face of a diamond golem, if one did not have good enough weapons, it was better to run away as soon as possible. After the diamond golem in the Tower of the North Wind cooperated with the tower spirit, the challenge rating would be further improved. Originally, without the diamond golem, the challenge rating of the wizard tower was 21. With the diamond golem, the challenge rating of the wizard tower directly reached 25, which was close to the edge of high-level legendary. For the diamond golem, Hathaway also made some optimizations, reducing the weight of the golem and strengthening its defense and attack power. Now Hathaway was studying another legendary golem. Although the diamond golem was powerful, it could not fly. It was not good to deal with some powerful flying creatures, such as dragons. Hathaway was ready to build a few legendary golems with flying ability. Golem could be used for enchantment. Its effect was roughly equivalent to the blood of the frost giant chieftain he had killed before, but the amount was much smaller. This bottle of blood could at most be used by one person. After using it, a Tier 4 warrior would obtain a transformation effect. It could be considered a pseudo-legendary rank, possessing legendary combat power, similar to Boulder and Johnson among the barbarians. Su Len intended to use this bottle of blood as a reward and let his subordinates use their points to exchange for it. Boulder and Johnson had now reached the peak of their power. After transforming, their combat power would increase to the legendary rank. Given some time, they would almost be able to cross the boundary of mortals and become true legendary powerhouses. After sorting out the things, Su Len also obtained a legendary skill point this time. However, his other skills had not yet been upgraded to the advanced level. It would be a waste to use this legendary skill point, so he could only put it aside for the time being. The transportation work at Shipwreck Harbor lasted for a day. At the same time, Su Len also had people raid Cyclops' lair. In Cyclops' lair, hundreds of thousands of kinnar were also found. In addition to the harvest at Shipwreck Harbor, Su Len had almost obtained tens of millions of kinnar this time. After all the materials were transported to the ship, Su Len looked back at Shipwreck Harbor, then waved goodbye reluctantly. This place had given him too much. When they came out, there were 3 ships, and when they returned, there were 18 ships. At the same time, there were also a large number of pirate captives. It could be said that Deepwater City had become rich from this wave. On the way back, Su Len did not encounter any more pirates. After all, after such a long time, the news of him killing the Dragonborn Pirate King had spread throughout the surrounding waters. No pirate dared to appear in front of him. It took a week for the 18 ships to return to Deepwater City. When the fleet returned, the whole city was in an uproar. Among the 18 ships, several of the best hull structures were assigned to the Navy, but these armed merchant ships still needed to be strengthened before they could enter the Navy for service. As for the remaining ships, they would be converted into armed merchant ships and used for ocean trade. The Cyclops pirates, the Tigershark pirates, and the pirates under the Dragonborn Pirate King also needed to be trained. These pirate captives added up to an astonishing 1,500 people, and now the number of Navy in Deepwater City was less than 500 people. Without sullen suppression, these pirates would not be so obedient. For these pirates, Su Len gave them 2 choices. One was to become slaves in Deepwater City. After working here for 3 years, they could obtain the status of a free person and live an ordinary life. The other was to join the Navy. However, whether joining the Navy or becoming a slave, they needed to go to the prison in the city to learn. In order to avoid these pirates from causing trouble in Deepwater City. In fact, Su Len thought too much. These pirates had seen Sullen's power with their own eyes, especially when he could summon a dragon and a magic ship. After defeating the Pirate King, they were even more in awe of him. In the end, 300 of the 1,500 pirate captives decided not to join the navy, but to become slaves. After 3 years of work in Deepwater City, they would obtain the status of a free person and start a new life. Although the pirates drank big bowls of wine, ate big mouthfuls of meat, and spent a lot of money, in fact, they also wanted a stable life. Therefore, after Su Len promised that these pirates could retire after a few years of service, they were very surprised and their morale was high. Chapter 630. It had been a month since Su Len returned to Northtown City. The wealth he brought back this time had been used to buy all kinds of materials. With such a large amount of money, the price of the surrounding magic materials had risen a little. The one with the lowest price was the little red dragon, Onyx Via. Originally, the little red dragon had hoped that the Kinnar would be put into the treasury or given to her. In the end, Su Len had spent it all, which made the little red dragon lose sleep. Fortunately, there was still a lot of Kinnar in the treasury. Otherwise, the little red dragon would have been furious. In the secret plane, Su Len, Hathaway, and Alex were experimenting. A huge silver-white ring was placed on the ground. On this ring, there were countless strange runes engraved. The ground was paved with pure white marble. This place had been completely transformed into a large testing ground. At this time, Hathaway and Alex were standing on both sides of the ring. The two legendary wizards floated in mid-air. Powerful mana made their wizard robes bulge. Sullen's figure stood on the other side. The lightning energy on his body had been activated, and endless lightning surrounded him. Su Len, Hathaway, and Alex were testing the giant floating ring in front of them. This was a super large floating ring that Hathaway and Alex had finally created after several optimizations. This floating ring was much larger than the ones used in wizard towers. It was used to install in the floating city.
If the experiment was successful and proved that this floating ring could be used, then they could first determine the size of the floating city.
"Are you ready?" Hathaway asked.
"It's done."
Su Luen and Alex nodded.
"Good, then let's begin."
Hathaway nodded. Su Len, if anything goes wrong, immediately open an energy barrier and cut off the energy link of the floating ring. Testing the floating ring requires Alex and I to be fully focused. If there's a mistake in our design, it could lead to serious consequences and damage the floating ring. This thing is too expensive to make. We don't have that much money to make a new one. Remember, you must cut off the energy link as soon as possible.
Su Len nodded with a serious expression.
"Don't worry, leave it to me. If there is any problem, I will cut off the energy supply immediately. Also, you two have to be careful. If you can't avoid it, then protect yourself first. If the floating ring is damaged, we can continue to make it." "Okay." Hathaway and Alex nodded at Su Len. "Let's begin." As soon as Hathaway's voice fell, a spiritual light rose from the werewolf's body. Then, a powerful mana rose from the two of them. As the powerful mana surged, the runes on the floating ring began to light up one by one. Two powerful mana surged from the two of them and entered the floating ring. The powerful mana flowed quickly, creating a circle of energy vortex around them. As the runes lit up one after another, finally, all the runes on the floating ring in front of them flickered with spiritual light. When all the runes lit up, a powerful force was transmitted from the floating ring. This force acted on the surroundings, and the ground around them began to shake slightly. This shaking did not weaken as time passed. Instead, it became stronger and stronger. Rumble! A huge figure emerged from the ground. Under this amazing force, the ground under everyone's feet seemed to turn over like an earth dragon. The ground was like an earthquake, and the powerful force was transmitted in all directions. With Hathaway and Alex as the center, everything within 300 meters of them shook violently. Finally, this force formed a huge circular energy field. Within this field, the ground was forcibly separated by this force. The entire ground was forcibly lifted by an endless force. The surrounding energy field was also distorted. On this part of the ground, the original gravity had completely disappeared. The gravity on this piece of land had been completely cut off. The floating ring was actually controlling gravity. By controlling gravity, the floating city could float in the air. There were many kinds of technology needed to build a floating city. Gravity was only one of them. In fact, a qualified floating city was like a miniature world. The top few topics in this world were the half-plane transformation technology, also known as Genesis, the floating city technology, the neutron star golem technology, and so on. Building a floating city required changing the internal structure, changing space, riddles, ecological systems, and so on. With Hathaway and Alex's magic transmission, this piece of land successfully lifted off the ground and flew up. Because of the spread of this force, many of the surrounding rocks had already flown up. Tower Spirit 1, begin collecting all kinds of data from the floating ring. As the floating ring stabilized, Hathaway immediately said. The Tower Spirit, which had already been prepared, immediately scanned. A red light swept over, and the Tower Spirit's voice sounded. Energy transmission normal. The floating ring is operating normally. Current operation rate is 50%. Current experimental results have been achieved. A huge piece of land with a diameter of more than 400 meters and a thickness of more than 2 meters was easily lifted up by the floating ring. After Hathaway and Alex waited for a while, this piece of land finally calmed down and then began to slowly rise. Now, this piece of land had risen more than 20 meters and was still rising. With the passage of time, under the guidance of the floating ring, the entire piece of land had risen to a height of 500 meters. Under the effect of the floating ring, this island was like a floating island. It's a success, Su Len said excitedly. Hathaway and Alex were also overjoyed and secretly relieved. Energy transmission stable. Begin recording experimental data. Calculating the weight of the floating ring. Scanning the floating ring's status. Calculating the floating ring's energy consumption. Calculating the floating ring's energy conversion rate. Rays of light flashed continuously. The Tower Spirit was calculating the specific data of the floating ring. Hathaway and Alex continued to inject magic into the floating ring. It was not easy to maintain such a large floating ring. Hathaway and Alex began to guide the energy of the elemental pool after the floating ring was operating normally. Otherwise, it would be difficult to rely on the two of them to inject magic. After all, the floating ring's energy consumption was very high. Chapter 631. As Tower Spirit Number 1 continued to scan and record data, Hathaway and Alex began to operate more on the floating space ring. The floating space ring used on the floating space city had to deal with a lot of bad situations, so the floating space tower had stricter requirements. Rumble! There was a loud rumbling sound, and some cracks suddenly appeared in the middle of the huge piece of land that was originally floating in the sky. Cracks began to appear on the originally flat ground. The anti-gravity force field of the floating space ring is in disorder. The force field is deviated, and the land is broken. Scanning for the cause of the force field deviation. Tower Spirit Number 1 immediately scanned the surroundings, and Hathaway and Alex immediately controlled the energy output. Scanning complete, the 39th rune design has deviated, causing the anti-gravity force field in the area to deviate after reaching a certain value, and it will interfere with the surrounding force field. Hathaway was slightly relieved. It's not a big problem, we'll modify it after the experiment, and now continue the test. Okay. Su Len nodded, and then the test continued. Then Hathaway and Alex continued to control the floating space ring and began to conduct other tests. The floating space ring controlled the piece of land and began to move slowly, and the huge piece of land slowly moved back and forth under the influence of the floating space ring. Tower Spirit Number 1 constantly scanned and recorded the floating piece of land. The land has an unknown vibration in the horizontal state. Cracks appear in the land. The anti-gravity force field is tilted in the descending state. The anti-gravity force field is deviated in the fast horizontal movement, and slight cracks appear in the land. The energy efficiency of the floating space ring is 63.7% on average. Soon, all the tests of the floating space ring were over, and Hathaway and Alex controlled the floating space ring to descend slowly. Although there were many problems in the test, overall it was very good. This time, the floating space ring held up a large area of land, and although it was still some distance away from the floating space city, the test was considered a success. The weight of the land held up this time was calculated by Tower Spirit Number 1, and it was almost more than 3 million tons, which was heavier than the floating space tower. Furthermore, this was not the limit of the floating ring. If the floating ring were to operate at full capacity, the power output would be very high. The energy of the elemental pool in the Arcana realm was not enough to support the test. As for Hathaway and Alex, they had to bear a lot of pressure. As Hathaway and Alex slowly reduced the energy supply, the floating island began to descend slowly, finally stopping 3 meters in the air. At this height, they needed to be careful if they wanted to continue descending. Sullen's energy was quickly released and enveloped the entire floating island.
Prepare to land.
Prepare to cut off the energy of the elemental pool. Prepare to count down. 10, 9, 8. Increase the magic output. It has reached the critical point. Begin landing. The floating island trembled slightly before descending steadily.
After a series of noises, the huge floating island slowly landed on the ground.
Success.
Hathaway breathed a sigh of relief.
It seems that our theory is correct. Next, we need to make various improvements to this gigantic floating ring. Alex said. Yes. Although it's a success, there are still many problems with the floating ring. For example, the energy conversion efficiency is only 63.7%. You should know that the floating ring in the Tower of the Northern Winds has an energy conversion efficiency of more than 95%.
This difference is more than 30%.
We need to optimize it again. There's also the energy field deviation that occurred during the test. These problems need to be solved. Otherwise, even if the floating ring flies, it will fly in a slanted direction.
I've already noted it down.
We'll make changes when we get back. Su Len slowly retracted his energy.
When they were descending, he had released a large amount of energy to protect the entire floating island.
We need to upgrade the energy center as soon as possible.
Su Len said.
We plan to build a floating ring that can accommodate 50,000 to 100,000 people. This is the level of a medium-sized floating ring. The current elemental fission furnace cannot support such a large floating ring.
Got it.
Hathaway made a face at Su Len. The theoretical verification of the elemental fusion furnace has been completed, but some of the materials required are very high. We don't have a good solution yet. We need materials that can withstand high temperatures. Materials with high magic conductivity are not so easy to make. I don't know what materials the Arcanists used. Alex said with some curiosity. Anyway, it should be a very magical material. The gap between the current wizard civilization and the arcane empire is still very big. In terms of magic material science, magic theory, magic energy use, and supermagic characteristics, they can't be compared at all. Just like in the arcane empire era, the high-grade golems they used could basically self-recover.
The main reason for this was the use of a kind of memory metal.
After this memory metal is formed, if it is damaged, it will quickly recover. In the arcane empire era, those high-grade golems were notoriously difficult to deal with. It was only after the arcane empire era disappeared that golems that could self-recover could not be made because of the lack of key materials. Since then, golems made of other materials slowly began to become popular. Speaking of which, the memory metal is also a very important secret of the arcane empire. Wizards have more or less obtained this kind of memory metal golems in the ruins, but even knowing the location of today's memory metal golems, they still haven't been cracked.
Su Len smiled slightly.
Don't think so much. When I have the chance, when I go to the secret realm again, I'll see if I can get you a memory metal golem.
That's great.
I've only heard of these memory metal golems in some information. I haven't really seen them yet. When the time comes, even if I can't crack the secret of the memory metal, I can still understand some of them.
Hathaway said excitedly.
Don't think so much. Now let's improve the floating ring.
Alex interrupted the conversation between the two.
Now this kind of floating ring consumes a lot of energy. Although the elemental fission furnace can also support a city with a scale of 50,000 to 100,000 people, even the most radical arcanists won't consume more than half of their power to maintain the floating state of the city. The floating city requires a lot of energy, but the energy consumption must be kept below 20%. Otherwise, it can't afford the energy consumption of the floating city. Chapter 632. The elemental fission furnace could indeed be used as the energy core of a floating space city, but it could only drive a miniature floating space city. This kind of floating space city was larger than a floating space tower and could accommodate 5,000 to 10,000 people. The floating space city Su Len intended to build was a medium-sized floating space city. This kind of floating space city was the most numerous floating space city in the era of the Arcane Empire. A large floating space city was a floating space city with more than 100,000 people. The upper limit of this kind of floating space city could reach an astonishing 300,000 people. Its combat power was amazing and it was the most powerful strategic weapon in the era of the Arcane Empire. This kind of floating space city required the use of mice energy nuclei as the energy core. In the era of the Arcane Empire, only mice energy nuclei could drive a floating space city of this scale. However, with the fall of the Arcane Empire, the manufacturing process of mice energy nuclei had long disappeared. Not to mention this kind of large floating space city, even a miniature floating space city had never appeared. The great arcanists in the era of the Arcane Empire also studied a substitute for mice energy nuclei, which was the element annihilation furnace. This kind of element annihilation furnace provided a huge amount of energy, thousands of times more than elemental fusion. It could easily lift a large floating space city. The arcanists even designed a giant floating space city. The concept of a giant floating space city had been around for a long time. Several mice energy nuclei were arranged according to the arrangement of the energy matrix, and then the giant floating space city was lifted. However, the great arcanists soon discovered that building this kind of giant floating space city was not worth the cost. A giant floating space city could accommodate 500,000 people, but it required 4 to 5 mice energy nuclei. However, if used separately, 4 to 5 large floating space cities were more practical than this kind of giant floating space city. Therefore, this kind of giant floating space city was soon abandoned. Now, the floating space ring of North City could theoretically lift a land with a diameter of 800 to 1,000 meters into the sky, which was basically equivalent to connecting the surface of a miniature floating space city. If the current city of North Wind Principality was calculated, a city of this size would at most be a town. This area was really nothing. During the era of the Arcane Empire, few people would build this kind of floating space city. This size of floating space city was from the age of thorium. At that time, the floating city's energy transmission efficiency was low, and the floating ring technology used was very limited. Any of the famous floating cities of the Arcane Kingdom had an area of more than 10 square kilometers. Basically, the entire North Town city and a large amount of surrounding farmland were lifted into the air. Hathaway and Alex continued to make adjustments to the floating ring. Some of the runes on the floating ring needed to be removed. Then, it was replaced with another rune inscription. At the same time, with the help of the Tower Genie, Hathaway and Alex started adjusting the anti-gravity field after the activation of the floating ring. There were some problems with the anti-gravity energy on the floating ring, and there were repeated problems in some areas. This was also the reason for the crack in the center of the floating island. If he didn't make any adjustments, there would be some problems when he used the floating city. Of course, the entire floating city was made of obsidian, so it was very resistant to stretching. There wouldn't be any cracks like the previous floating island experiment, but after a long time, there would definitely be problems, and it would also consume a lot of energy for nothing. After Hathaway and Alex continued their research, Sulen left Northtown City and came to the underground world. The underground world had been controlled by the little succubus Chrissy. The underground world was a raw material base in the Duchy of North Wind. It was rich in all kinds of ores and a large number of magic gems. The little succubus with amazing charm could easily enslave these underground creatures. This kind of enslavement was much better than the enslavement of the wizards. Now, just Chrissy alone could easily enslave tens of thousands of underground creatures. As the elemental tide became stronger and stronger, the planar barrier of the main material world began to weaken gradually. This wasn't a good thing. The weakening of the planar barrier of the main material world would lead to some powerful creatures from other worlds entering the main material world. According to the news sent by the Imperial Secret Service, there was an amazing sandstorm in the Desert Kingdom, covering the sky and the sun. It was like the end of the world, and there were many elemental creatures in Icewind City in the north. There were reports of a large number of mutant beasts in many places. Some people even found traces of devils. The south had always been very popular with all kinds of devils and demons. When there were more people, they could do something. The elemental tide had a great impact on this world. Su Len was making some preparations for the floating city. He was going to build a half-plane. It wasn't easy to create a half-plane.
It required a very high level of basic knowledge, such as plane knowledge, spatial knowledge, elemental knowledge, ecological knowledge, and so on. Under normal circumstances, this kind of knowledge could only be seen when one reached a very high level. Su Len had a photographic memory. After this period of learning, he finally met the requirements of building a half-plane. After reaching the legendary level, wizards would have the ability to create half-planes. Su Len didn't care much before. But now that he was preparing to build the floating city, he naturally had to bring the half-plane.
With Sullen's current strength, creating a world was too easy. If it was a god, creating a half-plane wasn't very difficult. Gods had the talent of changing reality. As long as they put in a little effort, their lives would be relatively comfortable. The half-plane needed to form an elemental circuit, forming a simple ecological cycle inside. Su Len took out the Thunder God's spear, which was brought back by Su Len himself. The divine weapon, the Thunder God's spear, shone with a dazzling light. Su Len gently stroked, and a spatial crack suddenly appeared in the original space. The crack quickly expanded. Sullen's figure flashed and had already passed through the crack. It was a deep darkness, and there was no light around. Sullen's figure stood in the void, the Thunder God's spear in his hand flashing. The dazzling lightning cut through the darkness, and then a small space appeared in front of him. Infinite power of thunder and lightning spewed out from Sullen's body, and the half-plane that was shaking suddenly stopped. The half-plane still needed to be connected to the 4 elemental planes and rely on the 4 elemental planes to stabilize this half-plane. Only when this place was completely stabilized would it no longer be needed. A divine light emerged from Sullen's body, followed by dazzling lightning. The half-plane, which was originally only a dozen square meters in size, began to expand rapidly. It only took about a few minutes for this half-plane to expand to 300 meters. Then Su Len waved the Thunder God's spear and stroked it hard. A spatial passage appeared in front of him. Chapter 633. A golden bolt of lightning flashed across the dark world. The dark world was illuminated by this bolt of lightning. After the expansion of the half-plane ended, the space inside had reached a diameter of 500 meters. After the half-plane expanded to this size, the space barrier at the edge began to tremble slightly, and some areas even showed signs of collapsing. Seeing this, Su Len decisively stopped the expansion of the half-plane. Then, a ray of light rose from his body. Mana reshaping plus space construction. A pale golden brilliance flickered, and a golden light appeared on the space barrier of the half-plane. The planar barrier that was showing signs of collapsing instantly stabilized. The newly established demiplane was completely empty. Apart from Su Luen, there was nothing else.
If he wanted to enrich the demiplane, he would have to connect the 4 elemental planes and extract elemental energy, or he could directly connect the demiplane to the prime material plane. Although the demiplane was only 500 meters in radius, it would continue to grow with the input of energy. These demiplanes could even grow to a state not inferior to the prime material plane. Of course, the amount of energy needed to grow to this extent could be said to be an astronomical figure, and it would also take an astonishing amount of time. Perhaps only those large wizard organizations had the time and energy to cultivate a half-plane to a state close to the main material plane. Su Len looked at the empty half-plane, then drew a line in the air with the Thunder God's spear in his hand. A powerful force instantly broke the space barrier. Planar channel. Open. A pale golden brilliance was released from Sullen's body, and an energy channel suddenly appeared in the originally dark and deep void. As the energy channel opened, a gust of wind element appeared in this half-plane. Air started appearing in the originally empty demiplane. Wisps of wind blew, and as the wind elemental plane was connected, thin air appeared in the demiplane. Life forms could barely breathe here and didn't need to rely on spells for internal breathing. However, although there was air, this half-plane was still empty. Next, Su Len connected to the earth elemental plane again. An invisible gravity appeared here, and at the same time, traces of soil began to appear in the originally empty half-plane. As the earth elemental plane continued to input energy into the half-plane, soil began to quickly appear in this half-plane. The soil was very barren and unsuitable for planting. Only when the earth element reached a certain concentration would the soil slowly become fertile. A breeze blew, and the air was slightly moist. After the water elemental plane was connected, this half-plane was no longer dry. Streams of water began to gather quietly. As the water elemental energy continued to increase, a new small lake appeared in the half-plane. With air, water, and land, this half-plane was not considered complete. The temperature in the half-plane was very low. The temperature of a newly formed half-plane was about the same as the temperature of the astral plane. Ordinary people could not survive here at all. This was also why Su Len and the others had long surpassed the boundary of ordinary creatures and become extraordinary. A ray of light appeared in the demiplane, and then the temperature of the ice-cold demiplane slowly rose. Some light also appeared in the originally dark demiplane. As the half-plane and the 4 elemental planes completed the connection,
A strange power of law also shrouded the half-plane. Then a plane barrier appeared and covered this half-plane. With the plane barrier, this half-plane became Sullen's private space. If others wanted to enter, they had to get Sullen's permission. If Su-Len did not agree, even gods could not enter. In fact, building a half-plane was very similar to a god creating a kingdom. But a god's kingdom was much larger than Sullen's. Gods used divine power to create their kingdoms, which was much more powerful than wizards.
For example, they only needed to say that there should be light, and there would be light in the kingdom.
If they said that there should be land, there would be land. In a god's kingdom, there was indeed nothing they could not do. As long as there was enough divine power, a god's kingdom could be built very quickly. Sullen's half-plane now looked very simple. Even the most barren place in the material world was better than this. Although it was very simple, Su-Len was very happy. He was the one who created this world. As long as he continued to modify it, the half-plane would change according to his wishes. Modifying a plane was a very large project. It required a lot of knowledge. Without enough knowledge, there would be a lot of problems in the half-plane created in the end. The proportion of the various elements in the half-plane needed to be carefully adjusted. Too much of any element would affect the half-plane. The wind element was very important to the half-plane. He decided whether other creatures could survive in the half-plane. After all, normal creatures still needed to breathe, and the oxygen content had to reach a certain standard. Many adepts had failed miserably at this step back in the day. Since ancient times, there were many legendary wizards who could create half-planes. However, there were very few who could make a half-plane almost the same as a material plane. The 4 elemental channels had been connected. Next, the elemental energy began to flow into the half-plane. The growth of the half-plane required the efforts of the creator. They had to use their own power to guide the energy and let it grow. When the elemental energy in the half-plane reached a certain level, it was time to plan the space. This was very crucial. The direction of the half-plane's growth had to be determined at this time. The creator could plan the half-plane.
For example, creating some mountains and rivers, where the water would flow, where it would end up, and how the weather would change in the half-plane.
This kind of modification required a lot of knowledge. If there was not enough knowledge, it would lead to very serious consequences. For example, some half-planes had problems with the water element. In the end, the whole plane would turn into a desert with sand everywhere. Or the fire element would overflow and turn the half-plane into a volcanic belt. Volcanoes would erupt everywhere, turning the half-plane into an abyss. Some half-planes had low temperatures, and the whole plane would enter an ice age with thick layers of ice everywhere. Sullen's half-plane was going to be installed on the floating city. It would be used to grow all kinds of crops. After all, the space in the floating city was limited. With this half-plane, it would become the floating city's logistics base. Many floating cities could roam in the astral plane for thousands of years.
Other than energy, the half-plane of the floating city could produce all kinds of things.
P.S. I recommend this book, Old God's Ruler, by Akina-san. It's very boring, so don't worry. Chapter 634. Transforming a demiplane was a technical job. Any mistake could lead to serious consequences. Even the gods would be very careful when transforming their kingdoms. When different types of energy met, they would have different changes. For example, fire and earth elements could create magma. Magma could cause volcanoes to erupt. Metal veins could be added, or land could be added. When wind and fire elements fused together, there would be a monsoon. Then there would be cold air and hot air. When the cold air and hot air met, they would form wind. If the water element was fused together, it would become rain. If Su-Luen wanted the demiplane to grow, then he needed to understand this knowledge as well as make detailed calculations. This kind of calculation required a lot of work. Fortunately, Su-Luen already had 3 tower spirits. With the 3 tower spirits working together, the calculation speed would be much faster. The creation of a demiplane was not something that could be done in a short time. After connecting the 4 elemental planes, Su-Len left the demiplane and returned to North Town. The demiplane would slowly grow as it absorbed elemental energy. Su-Len only needed to guide it. When the demiplane grew to a certain level, he would do other things. Demiplanes were basically useless right now. They could only be used as a storage space to store things. Only when the demiplane grew to a certain level would it be transformed. Many legendary wizards would transform their demiplanes into storage spaces or other things like laboratories or fortresses.
There were very few who would transform their demiplanes into material planes.
After all, it would take a lot of time and money. Liches usually liked to transform their demiplanes into fortresses or castles and move their wizard towers inside. This way, they would not be disturbed and could study spells in peace. Liches were not necessarily evil creatures. Many liches were neutral, and many wizards would turn into liches for the sake of magic research. After all, in theory, liches could exist as long as they were not killed. There were many demiplanes in the astral plane.
Some of them were created by the laws of the multiverse.
Others were left behind by other wizards.
There were even some fallen kingdoms in the astral plane.
These places were the favorite of the astral plane explorers. Such semi-planes or fallen divine kingdoms usually had some good stuff.
Over the long years, from the beginning of the Silver Age to the later era of the Arcane Empire, until now, the strong people born in the material plane had never given up on the exploration of the astral world.
There were many things that couldn't be found in the material plane, but there were many in the astral world. These experts who explored the astral world were also known as astral world explorers. One of the prerequisites for becoming an astral world explorer was to be a legend. Although legendaries could enter the astral plane, most of the time, only high-level legendaries could become explorers of the astral plane. After all, there were many dangers in the astral plane, and even legendary wizards were not safe here. Legendaries could only conduct limited exploration near planets or material planes. Only high-ranking legendaries could adventure in the astral plane for a long time. After the astral world explorer was the astral world traveler.
At this level, it meant that he was very powerful and could travel for a long time in the astral world or go to other planes.
These astral travelers were also known as astral merchants. They would trade with each other when they traveled to other planes. These astral world travelers often had many good things in their hands. The profits of the astral boundary caravans were astonishing. Basically, every astral merchant was filthy rich. As for the highest-level astral world traveler, it had been a long time since they appeared.
These experts could basically move freely in the astral world.
Even if they encountered demons, evil gods, or abominations, they could easily deal with them and escape unscathed. The light of dawn illuminated the earth. Chris slowly woke up from her sleep. She moved her arm that was a little uncomfortable, then sat up and stretched. A few rays of sunlight penetrated the curtains and reflected her amazing curves. She had just woken up from her dream and was still a little dazed. Although the legendary succubus was already very strong, she was still far from being Sullen's opponent. However, compared to the others, her current state was obviously much better. Hathaway and Alex were still a little tired. After all, as wizards, their physical fitness was even stronger than that of an ordinary legendary warrior, let alone Sulen.
"Is it morning already?"
Alex rubbed her eyes and asked as she got up. "It's 9 o'clock. Do you want to sleep for a while more?" "Don't worry, the master has already left." Chris gently lifted Alex's delicate chin with her slender fingers and teased. "Nah, I still have some unfinished experiments." Alex gently slapped Chris's arm away and yawned as she got up from the bed. "Sister Hathaway, you still have unfinished experiments on your side? Do you want to come with me?" Alex shook Hathaway next to her and said. Hathaway stretched her body beautifully. Her beautiful curves were enviable. She was also a little tired, so after hearing Alex's voice, she casually agreed. A third of the elemental fusion furnace is already completed. The rest will take at least 2 or 3 months, Hathaway said. Now that the Northwind Tower had a few legendary wizards, the progress of their research had greatly increased. "I think we should make another tower spirit. We have too much research going on right now. Most of the time, we need a tower spirit to calculate and record." "That is indeed necessary, but we don't have any legendary soul crystals right now. We need to ask Sulen for one." "Let's ask Sulen later. We need an auxiliary tower spirit." "Right, the floating city would definitely need more than one tower spirit in the future." Luckily, Sulen had a few legendary soul crystals, which would be enough. "By the way, have you completed the elemental annihilation furnace?" Alex suddenly asked. "This kind of high-grade elemental furnace is too difficult. Right now, I only have some theoretical knowledge." Hathaway shook her head and said. The few of them quickly changed their clothes and got up, then went to the wizard tower to work. At this time, Su Len was suppressing the god's corpse in the secret area. During this time, he would come here every once in a while to extract divinity from the god's corpse. The god's corpse had very high divinity. Although part of it had been absorbed by the god's abomination, the remaining divinity was still shockingly high. After some simple calculations, Su Len estimated that there were about 20 points of divinity left in the god's corpse. With so much divinity, if Su Len absorbed all of it, it would be more than enough to directly upgrade to a weak divine power. Chapter 635. Although it was not the first time that Su Len had stood near this corpse, he still felt a sense of awe. This awe came from the depths of his bloodline. It was the awe that mortals had for gods. Although Su Len was already a demigod, he was not a god. It was unknown how long the god's corpse had been dead, but it still contained some vitality. The god's corpse was broken. Because it had once given birth to an abomination, most of the vitality in the god's corpse had been extracted by the abomination. Now, the remaining power could no longer give birth to another abomination. The corpse, which was more than 30 meters long, lay quietly on the ground. It exuded a sense of oppression, and there was still a residual divine power on the surface of its body. In addition to this divine power, the corpse was also shrouded in the power of death and decay, which was emitted after the death of a god. Sullen's body flashed, and then his body flew up gently. This ancient god's corpse must have died quite miserably. There were many wounds on the corpse, and the most serious injury was on the head. The head of this corpse was severely injured, and half of its head was missing. Ancient gods were very powerful. Although they had been dead for thousands or even tens of thousands of years, they still retained a fragment of consciousness. If one used telepathy to communicate with this corpse, it would talk about the glory of the ancient gods in a strange tone and a special language. The birth of the world, the emergence of the multiverse, the ancient gods of order began to rule the world. In the lower planes, endless chaotic rules and consciousness also appeared, and the birth of the first generation of chaos demons. There was even some information about the origin of demons. In its narration, demons did not originate from the bottomless abyss. They seemed to have migrated from another place. Sometimes, Su Luen wanted to know more secrets, but unfortunately, this god's corpse didn't have any consciousness. The remnant fragments of consciousness were more like an NPC, and they just kept repeating these things. Dazzling golden light slowly emitted from the corpse. Su Len gently touched it, and the golden light converged into a beam of light that was slowly extracted. Extracting divinity from the corpse of an ancient god was not as easy as extracting it from an abomination. Su Len had to fight against the corpse of the ancient god. After all, the divinity originally belonged to this ancient god. Although the ancient god had fallen, the divinity would resist anyone other than the ancient god. Su Len needed to remove all the remaining consciousness in the divinity. Energy absorption. Sullen's body floated in the air as the enormous energy formed a torrent of magic power. He reached out and grabbed the ancient god's corpse, and the pale golden energy was forcibly extracted by him. The god power surrounding the god spirit suddenly surged. Sullen's extraction of the god's divinity triggered the ancient god's instinctive reaction. Fortunately, the ancient god had already fallen. Although its resistance was strong, it still could not stop Su Len. The faint golden light slowly flowed towards Su Len like a trickle. Above the golden light, there was also a feeling of death, madness, and destruction. These forces had to be removed carefully. This was the terrible evil and hatred born after the death of a god. The abominations were born because of the accumulation of this power. However, because the ancient god's corpse had given birth to the abomination, 70% to 80% of the power of hatred and destruction had been consumed. This power was carefully separated by Su Len, and the rest was absorbed. However, although this power was separated, there were still some remnants. After every extraction of the god's divinity, Su Len needed time to remove the remaining evil thoughts. The wisdom tree had the ability to purify, so under normal circumstances, after extracting the god's divinity, he would come to the wisdom tree in the mystery land to purify it. So far, this method was the most efficient and safest. In fact, if the wisdom tree evolved into the legendary tree of life or the world tree, purifying these evil thoughts would be done by just moving its branches. Unfortunately, the wisdom tree had a long way to go before it could evolve. A faint golden energy appeared in front of Su Len. This golden energy was the power of the god's divinity. Su Len gently waved his hand, and the power of the god's divinity was integrated into Sullen's body. As soon as the power of the god's divinity entered Sullen's body, The golden energy began to slowly integrate into his soul under the guidance of the lightning power. The power of the god's divinity was very special. This kind of power could integrate with any power in the multiverse. As traces of the god's divinity entered his body, Sullen's soul soon felt bloated. After sensing the changes in his soul, Su Len immediately stopped. If he continued to extract the god's divinity, his body would not be able to integrate. It would just be a waste. The faint golden energy beam was cut off, and the god's divinity returned to the god's corpse. The strange scene around him also slowly disappeared. As some of the god's divinity was extracted, the glow on the god's corpse seemed to have dimmed a little. The god's corpse also had a trace of decaying aura. Su Len resisted the urge to destroy and resealed the space used to seal the god's corpse. He then closed the wizard tower again and let the tower genie continue to watch over the place. Only then did he use a teleportation spell to leave this place. North Town Mystery Land. Su Len hurried to the vicinity of the wisdom tree. After greeting Sandy and the others, he returned to his room. As soon as he got close to the wisdom tree, Sullen's original irritable impulse to destroy everything began to weaken. What followed was a tranquil and natural smell. In fact, the best target to extract divinity was not the god's corpse, nor the ancient evil creatures. It was the unicorn, the eastern condor, the feathered serpent god, the totem spirit, and so on. The divinity contained in these divine creatures or divine spirits was very pure. It was not like the one Su Len extracted, which was full of chaos, evil, and destruction. Of course, the unicorn, the eastern condor, the feathered serpent god, and the totem spirit were not to be trifled with. After the arcane kingdom, the unicorn had become very rare. The eastern condor had also disappeared. The feathered serpent god had also left the material plane. As for the totem spirit, if one wanted to find this kind of intelligence, one had to go deep into the mountains and forests to find the uncivilized natives. The totem spirit was the god that the primitive tribes worshipped. Although they were not true gods, they had part of the power of the gods. It could be said that they were very difficult to deal with. The strength of the totem spirit was usually at the level of a demigod. However, there were some who worshipped a large number of people or worshipped for a long time. Their strength would not be inferior to that of a true god. Su Len meditated while slowly removing the remnant thoughts in his body. At the same time, he integrated the god's power into his body. Chapter 636. The faint aura of nature shrouded him, and the ancient tree of wisdom constantly emitted the power of nature. Su Len woke up from meditation, and the remaining evil thoughts in his body had dissipated a lot. Looking at the situation, it would be completely eliminated in about 2 more times. Without the ancient tree of wisdom, Su Len usually needed a week or even longer to use meditation to get rid of the remaining evil thoughts. According to the research on the ancient god's corpse, the divinity in the ancient god's corpse can be extracted more than 20 times. In addition to the divinity extracted from the ancient god's corpse when the abomination was born, this ancient god's corpse originally had more than 40 or even 50 points of divinity. Su Len rubbed his forehead and calculated, an ancient god's corpse contains 40 or 50 points of divinity, so how much divinity did he have when he was alive? A demigod needs 10 points, a weak god needs 20 points of divinity, and a weak god needs 50 points. This giant ancient god's corpse is at least a weak divine power god. It might even be a mid-divine power god. An ancient god's corpse has so much divinity, no wonder the god's corpse is called a treasure. The divinity and power of the gods in the age of the ancient gods were stronger than that of the later gods. However, the gods of faith grew faster, and the power of the ancient gods would not change much from birth to death in the divine war. But the gods of faith were different. As long as there were enough people who believed in them, their power would continue to grow. So as long as the material world was prosperous enough, the power of the gods would slowly grow. But there were also gods who did not grow in this way, such as the Queen of Spiders Lolth in the Abyss. After the death of a believer, the soul would enter the divine kingdom and become a petitioner. When returning to the divine kingdom, the believer would give back power to the god. The Queen of Spiders used this way to let the drows under her command kill each other and use all kinds of tricks to plot against each other. At the same time, she gave these drows the characteristics of sexual chaos, which also led to the drows having the highest fertility rate of all elves. Of course, if the fertility rate of the drows was the same as that of other elves, maybe the drows would have disappeared by now. After all, the drows had learned all kinds of infighting, backstabbing, betrayal, and so on. Clans would kill each other for revenge. Spider Queen Lolth used this method to make her believers kill each other. No matter who won, she would gain a lot of benefits. It was also through this method that the strength of God Empress Lolth continued to increase after a long period of fighting among the drows. Finally, taking advantage of a series of major events, he successfully became a god with great divine power. The price was that for thousands of years, the population of the drows had not increased but decreased. Drow infighting would cause a lot of deaths. Sometimes, the population would drop below the warning line. At this moment, the Spider Queen would directly surrender. Although the Spider Queen Lolth's method allowed her to obtain a large amount of divine power, it also came with considerable repercussions. Time passed little by little. In addition to extracting and digesting the divinity, Su Lin spent the rest of his time modifying the floating space tower. Su Lin had already decided to build a floating city, and various preparations had already begun. In order to reduce consumption, Su Lin planned to use Northgard City as the main body of the floating city. There were many buildings of wonder in Northgard City. These buildings of wonder had magical powers, and Su Lin was reluctant to leave these powers behind. After all, it would cost a lot of money and time to rebuild these buildings of wonder. After planning to use Northgard City as the main body of the floating city, the construction of the floating city could be said to have saved a lot of money. However, after using Northgard City as the main body of the floating city, it seemed that Northgard City needed to be modified. The foundation of the city needed to be replaced with obsidian and blessed with hardening, so that the floating city would become harder than steel. In the laboratory, Su Lin was conducting an experiment. He was making magic diamond, which was the main material for making diamond golems. Magic diamond was actually not diamond, but a kind of crystal, but it looked very similar to diamond in terms of hardness and appearance. This kind of crystal needed to be made in a special way. Galaxy. Prepare to record the data and start testing the artificial magic diamond experiment. The Galaxy Tower spirit appeared in mid-air, and a magic aura rose from Sullen's body. Then, countless tiny rune marks appeared in front of him. Rune marks were different from Mageweth's and runes. No matter what kind of rune it was, Mageweth's were two-dimensional, usually flat, but rune marks were different. They had a three-dimensional structure. Rune marks were formed by the combination of runes, and this kind of rune marks had great power. The use of rune marks had high requirements. It was a technique created in the Arcane Empire. Compared to runes, it was more efficient and powerful. Su Lin was now using rune marks. The golden aura continued to gather in mid-air, and soon the aura converged into a shiny rune. Su Lin gently sprinkled some silver powder, and the silver powder quickly filled the rune marks. As the rune became brighter and brighter, the rune in front of him quickly changed from a two-dimensional structure to a three-dimensional structure. With the appearance of the rune marks, Su Lin gently waved his hand, and the rune marks in front of him instantly merged into a silver vessel. Then, the aura flickered a few times and disappeared. There were many differences in structure between magic diamond and ordinary diamond. The molecular structure of magic diamond was not the octahedral joint of diamond, but a more complex structure, which required the use of other crystals, diamond, graphite, and other materials to modify. In terms of magic conductivity, magic diamond wasn't very good, but its magic resistance and physical resistance were shockingly high. Therefore, this special gem was very suitable for making diamond golems. Diamond stones were also called diamonds. Large and pure diamonds were very valuable and could be used in many experiments. Therefore, small diamonds were usually used when making magical diamonds. Diamond reserves were very high, and even high-quality large diamonds were very abundant. As for the rare situation of diamonds in his previous life, it was completely hyped up by businessmen. It was said that the number of diamonds mined by businessmen was enough to give everyone in the world a piece of diamond. Of course, the diamonds here were definitely not large, but small diamonds. That was a diamond less than a carat. How heavy was a carat? 0.2 grams. One could imagine how small it was. In his previous life, this thing was like an IQ tax, but you had to pinch your nose and buy it. As for the value of diamonds, it was even more of a scam. Recycled diamonds were worth less than 1/10 of the purchase price, and many times, they were rejected directly. Chapter 637. Magical adamantine used a part of diamond as raw materials, and another part was magical crystals and colorful gemstone powder. After mixing these materials according to a certain ratio and using some other methods to fuse and refine, the magical adamantine could be obtained. The ratio of this kind of magic diamond could be adjusted. Basically, every wizard had their own secret recipe. Different ratios would produce different properties of the magic diamond. For example, the magic diamond used in Hathaway's diamond statue was very outstanding in terms of physical and magical defense.
But on the other hand, these diamond statues were a bit inferior in terms of movement speed and energy conductivity. This was mainly because the 2 diamond golems made by Hathaway were basically used in the wizard tower.
They belonged to the defensive type. They would only fight when others attacked the wizard tower. This kind of golem cooperated with the tower spirit to fight, and the wizard tower would bless them with various spells.
Others, such as the offensive diamond golems, used magic diamond golems with better magic conductivity and decent physical and magic defense.
This kind of diamond golem had powerful attack power, fast movement speed, and all kinds of support spells. The golem army often used this kind of diamond golem. In addition to making diamond golems, magical adamantine could also be used to make another kind of golem, the arcane guard. The arcane guard was a legendary golem that was stronger than the diamond golem. The challenge level of the diamond golem was level 21, while the arcane guard was level 24. It was only a step away from high-level legendary. For example, the ratio of magical adamantine used by the arcane guard was completely different from that of the diamond golem.
This kind of magical adamantine had high magic conductivity, and this kind of magical adamantine also had high physical and magical resistance.
The only problem was that it was also very expensive. The arcane guard not only had strong melee ability, but it could also release various spells. In short, it was a kind of legendary golem that practiced both magic and martial arts. The strong combat power also meant that the production of this kind of golem was expensive. In the era of the Arcane Empire, there was a famous arcanist who said that the golem army was a combat power that was piled up with money. Su Len was now experimenting with the magical adamantine used to make the arcane guard. Information on golems of this level was basically classified as top-secret information. It was very difficult to trade for it. The Northwind Tower only had this kind of information because they had obtained it from the secret realm where the abomination was sealed. Although there was basically nothing left in that place, the Tower Genie's virtual library was still intact. Otherwise, the Northwind Tower would not have such high-end technology. However, there were only a few recipes for the enchanted crystal that he had obtained from the virtual library. Su Len had to mix them himself to find the right ratio. Then, he prepared the prepared magical diamond material and placed it in a special container. Su Len raised his head and looked at the magic clock hanging on the wall. He then said to Yin He, record the situation of the reactor every half an hour. If there are any abnormalities, inform me immediately. If everything is normal, let me know in 8 hours. Yes, master. The cold mechanical voice sounded in his ears. This method of synthesizing magical adamantine was to simulate a special environment and let the magical adamantine fuse according to certain conditions. This method did not require manual operation. In the era of the Arcane Empire, there were many alchemy workshops. They used professional alchemy furnaces to refine all kinds of synthetic metals and magical materials. It was said that in the era of the Arcane Empire, there were a lot of such factories. Their production in a day was comparable to the amount of magical metals that all the wizards in the Tyrol world could refine in a year. It was also because of this method that during the era of the Arcane Empire, those powerful arcanist teams could obtain a huge amount of resources and easily form all kinds of golem armies or magical creations. This was also one of the reasons why the Arcane Empire was so powerful. As long as they were willing, the number of various golems would increase tremendously under the full production of the factories. Moreover, there were many benefits to the factory. Although the factory standard could not produce high-quality golems, it could control the quality within a very small range, and the advantage of doing so was that the price was reduced. However, it also cost a lot of money to make an alchemy factory. It was necessary to invest in it. For example, the container used by Su Len just now was made of a lot of adamantine. The interior was made of some arcane steel, and the runes on it were engraved with mithril. The cost of this set of equipment was as high as millions of kinner, which was more expensive than a diamond golem. The amount of money an adept had was also an indication of how powerful that adept was. Of course, some of the guys who were favored by the goddess of luck needed to be distinguished. The world was very unfair. It was destined from the moment of birth. Family power and so on, there was a very special existence among them. These people's luck was so good that it made people jealous. It was not an exaggeration to say that they were blessed by the goddess of luck. For example, the arcanist who found the body of the ancient god.
In the boundless astral world, the probability of finding the body of an ancient god was basically 1 in tens of millions or even 1 in a billion.
The arcanist who found the body of the ancient god was favored by the goddess of luck. It was just that the arcanist had some problems with the use of the ancient god's body. How exaggerated would it be to be favored by the goddess of luck? It could be said that it was more powerful than having a protagonist's halo. When one went out to pick up money, one could do whatever one wanted. One could find treasures by just running around, and enemies would come knocking on one's door by just waving one's sword. It could be said that when the time came, the heavens and the earth worked together. Of course, the goddess of luck liked the new and hated the old. She was temperamental.
You might be favored by the goddess of luck 1 second, but the next second, the goddess of luck had already left.
The goddess of luck and the goddess of misfortune were a pair of twin goddesses, and the two of them did not get along well. The goddess of misfortune was jealous that the goddess of luck was loved by humans, while she, as a goddess, was feared by humans. This made the goddess of misfortune very jealous, so she deliberately went against the goddess of luck. The result was that after being favored by the goddess of luck, once this favor was lost, they would be cursed by the goddess of misfortune. As a result, many people ended up dying because they believed too much in luck. It was said that in the multiverse, there was a mithril mine that was entirely made of mithril. Perhaps only those who were favored by the goddess of luck could find this mithril mine. After about 8 hours, Su Len walked out of the meditation room. The tower spirit, Milky Way, had already told him that the alchemy reactor had stopped working. Su Len came in front of the reactor and checked the various data on the tower spirit, Milky Way's record. After confirming that everything was normal, he gently pressed a few times on the reactor. Accompanied by a burst of energy fluctuation, the sealed container on the reactor slowly opened at this moment. Su Len snapped his fingers, and a wizard's hand appeared in front of him. Su Len skillfully operated the wizard's hand and took out the item from the reactor. A purple crystal the size of an egg appeared in front of him. This purple crystal was very transparent and hard. It looked like a purple diamond. It was the enchanted diamond, also known as the enchanted crystal. Looks like the effect is not bad. Su Len picked up the enchanted diamond and examined it carefully. The enchanted diamond made in this way had completely met the requirements. A ray of light rose from Su Len's hand and checked the enchanted diamond. He nodded and said, "The quality is not bad. It's qualified." The enchanted diamond's conductivity was excellent. At the same time, its physical and magical resistance was also very high. It completely met the requirements of making an arcane guard. The next step was to start producing these enchanted diamonds. But before that, he planned to build an automatic alchemy factory. Since he had already experienced the convenience of the alchemy reactor, Su Len did not plan to give up just like that. Although this kind of alchemy reactor wasn't cheap, it was convenient to use. Another reason was that although the investment was huge, it would be very cost-effective in the long run. Moreover, Bignar wasn't taking it all out at once. He was using it for a long time. Tower Spirit Milky Way. "Give me the blueprint of the automatic alchemy factory," Su Len said. The automatic alchemy factory was mainly controlled by the Tower Genie. There were various clay golems that were responsible for the specific operations. Su Len only needed to set the program, and the clay golems would be produced according to the program. The Tower Genie, Milky Way, only needed to command the golems to carry out the work. At the same time, she would also be responsible for the daily maintenance of the alchemy factory. With the alchemy factory, the arcane steel, thorium, and other metals that required Su Len or Hathaway to synthesize could also be produced in the alchemy factory. It was convenient, fast, stable, and had a high success rate. Of course, in addition to the high cost, the alchemy factory also required a large amount of energy. If it was the old wizard tower, after installing the alchemy factory, there would be a shortage of energy in the elemental pool. This would require some reduction in other aspects. But now, the Northwind Tower had already installed the elemental fission furnace, and its energy was many times more than before. Not to mention an alchemy factory. Even if the energy consumption of the alchemy factory was increased tenfold, the Northwind Tower's energy would be more than enough. Although the elemental fission furnace is good, it is still far inferior to the elemental fusion furnace. It is more than enough for the Wizard Tower, but it is not enough for the floating city. Su Len rubbed his forehead. If he wanted to upgrade the floating city, he had to research the elemental fusion furnace. But Hathaway said last time that she had already started experimenting. I believe that the construction of the elemental fusion furnace will start soon. Chapter 638. Su Len didn't think about the elemental fusion furnace for the time being. What he needed to do now was to settle the alchemy factory. Tower Spirit Milky Way. How much mithril is left in the warehouse? Master, there are still 2 pounds of mithril. Take out 2 pounds of mithril, 30 arcane steel ingots, 1 pound of arcane dust, 12 pounds of astral silver sand, and 11 elemental stones. Su Len reported the materials he needed, and Milky Way quickly brought them over. Su Len gently waved his hand, and a flash of light appeared. Change form. Under the cover of the aura, the raw materials rapidly changed shape under the influence of the spell energy. Soon, metal parts appeared before his eyes. Next, he had to assemble these small metal parts and assemble them into an alchemy reactor. After a while, 12 alchemy reactors appeared in front of Su Len. In other words, this alchemy factory could produce 12 enchanted crystals at a time. After assembling these parts into an alchemy furnace, Su Luen carefully began to engrave runes inside the alchemy furnace. These runes provided various production environments for the alchemy furnace. A day passed quickly. When Su Len walked out of the laboratory, he looked a little tired. The alchemy factory was almost half completed. It would be finished in just one more day. Next, he could consider making Arcane Guardian statues. The Arcane Guardian Golem was a legendary rune life form. It was basically impossible to mass-produce such a legendary rune in a golem factory. The main reason for this was the soul core. This kind of soul core could only be made by legendary wizards and above, and there was no equipment that could replace legendary wizards. Even the rune engraving equipment in Sullen's alchemy factory in the secret plane couldn't do it. Of course, perhaps in the future, when more advanced equipment was produced, legendary soul cores could be made. The main body of an arcane guardian was made of enchanted crystals, adamantine, arcane steel, thorium, and legendary soul crystals. The cost of one was more than 3 million kinner. It could be said that it was more expensive than gold of the same weight. After paying such a huge price, the combat strength of these golems was also very amazing. They had high resistance to all kinds of elemental damage, and the arcane guard was immune to most spells. It was very difficult to destroy them with ordinary attacks. These golems had powerful melee combat ability, and even legendary warriors couldn't face them head-on. Moreover, they also had the ability to cast spells below the 7th circle, or energy rays. At the same time, these arcane guardians also possessed high intelligence. Defeating these magic golems would not be an easy task. These statues were the same as the diamond statues. They were immune to ordinary attacks. Only rare high-quality weapons could damage them. How strong were these arcane guardians? How strong were they? Basically, a legendary warrior would be beaten to a pulp when faced with such a golem. Arcane guardians were different from diamond statues. They had the ability to fly and fly. For example, if a diamond statue had the ability to fly, one could use kiting tactics to wear it down. Of course, this was only possible in theory. After all, one's attack power had to be strong enough to cause damage to the diamond statue. Most of the time, this kind of kiting tactic didn't kill the diamond statue, but the kite user would die of exhaustion. Of course, the wizards were not unaware of this weakness of diamond statues, but they still didn't improve it. The main reason was that diamond statues were usually used in wizard towers. With other means of defense, they didn't need the ability to fly. Arcane guardians were more powerful than diamond statues. The cost of one arcane guardian was enough to make several diamond statues. 2 days later, Su Len looked at the sci-fi reactor in front of him with excitement. After 2 days and a lot of materials, Su Len finally finished the alchemy factory. Su Len didn't have time to rest. He immediately ordered Milky Way, start producing enchanted crystals. Ding. Generating mission log. Mission establishing. Quest, make enchanted crystals. Alchemy factory starting self-check. Self-check complete. Everything is normal. Ready to work. Alchemy factory officially activated. A light flashed, and then a powerful elemental energy rushed out from the energy connection channel. The light blue elemental energy was steadily consumed. The 12 reactor furnaces slowly turned on, and the golems next to them put the various raw materials they had prepared. When all the materials were put in, the reactor furnace slowly flashed and started to work. It took 8 hours to produce a piece of enchanted crystal. Of course, this time wasn't fixed. The longer the reactor furnace was in production, the more enchanted crystals it would get in the end. However, the reaction furnace couldn't work forever. After all, there was a limit to the size of the reaction furnace. There was a limit to the size of the magic crystal. Once it reached that size, even if no one ordered it, the reaction furnace wouldn't continue to operate. This was the insurance that Su Len had set to protect the alchemy furnace. In the blink of an eye, 8 hours had passed. Following Milky Way's order, the 12 reactor furnaces in front of him slowly stopped. When the reactor furnace opened, Sullen's eyes lit up. The enchanted crystals that had just been produced appeared in front of Sullen's eyes. The light purple enchanted crystals were very beautiful. Su Len snapped his fingers, and a light flashed, and the appraisal of the enchanted crystals in front of him was completed. The appraisal results were good. After the appraisal, the 12 enchanted crystals in this batch all met the requirements. All of them pass. Su Len nodded in satisfaction, and then put the enchanted crystals on the table next to him. All right, Milky Way, try refining other alloys. Su Len immediately said. As soon as Sullen's voice fell, Milky Way controlled the alchemy factory to start work again. The refining of arcane steel took far less time than the refining of enchanted crystals. After about half an hour, the 12 reactor furnaces opened again, and the finished arcane steel appeared in front of Sullen's eyes. Su Len picked up a piece of arcane steel ingot and checked it. Although it wasn't as good as the ones he made himself, it was still of high quality and could be used. Next, Su Len seemed to have found a new toy. He kept letting Milky Way use the alchemy factory to refine other enchanted materials. And as expected, the alchemy factory completed the task quickly and well. Chapter 639. The early morning mist gradually dissipated, and the first rays of the morning sun shone on the northern city. This pearl of the north became very busy. Outside the city, the giant dragon bone water wheel kept turning, and the clear river water watered the newly planted farmland outside the city. Just half a month ago, the northern city had a big harvest again. Now, the main food crop in the northern city was no longer potatoes. In addition to potatoes, wheat, barley, soybeans, and other crops were widely planted here. There were also a lot of oats and corn. However, even if the planting area of potatoes was reduced, the yield of potatoes was still the highest. The land in the northern city was originally quite fertile, and with an abundant water source, the yield of food was quite good. More importantly, after the harvest altar, the land in the northern city became very fertile. It could almost be said that there were no pests or diseases. Therefore, although it was in the north, the yield of food here was enough to supply the entire Northwind Principality and the northern provinces of the Kingdom of Florence. Although the commoners here still ate potatoes as their staple food, they could still eat white bread once or twice a month. They could even occasionally buy a few fish to satisfy their cravings. This was completely unimaginable in other places. One had to know that in other countries, it was already a luxury for commoners to be able to eat black bread for every meal, let alone white bread and grilled fish. After a few years of development, Northern Town City was very rich in resources. With the addition of the centaurs, there were a lot of cows and horses in Northern Town City. Meat was also very plentiful in the market, and the price wasn't too expensive. Even commoners could afford it. Many people who came to the city wanted to live here. It could be said that the population of Northern Wind Principality was growing very quickly. After getting up in the morning, Su Luen stretched himself and moved his body. Then he picked up the breakfast prepared by Angela, his personal maid, and ate it. Master! Another half-elf maid suddenly came over and said. Su Len was slightly surprised. What's wrong? What's the matter? Today, I received a message from Madame Hathaway. The star cluster spire in the south wants to communicate with us. Anna said with a standard bow of a court lady. Also, Madame Chris said that she found a place where monsters were entrenched in the underground world. She also found some special ores there. Star cluster spire? Special ores? What is the stellar spire doing here? Su Len was a little puzzled, but he still nodded and promised to meet them. Compared to the stellar spire, he was more concerned about the special ore found in the underground world. Su Len quickly arrived at the underworld through the teleportation circle. Due to the underworld's environment, a small number of monsters would often appear, so there were always patrols to clean up. When Su Len arrived, a small group of Tauren guards was already waiting for him. There was a heavy metal box beside the guard. Seeing Su Len coming over, the guard respectfully opened the box. Su Len took a look inside and found some gray-looking ores without any luster. Su Len slightly frowned. There didn't seem to be anything strange about these ores. However, at this moment, Su Len suddenly sensed a very weak energy fluctuation. Moreover, this energy fluctuation was somewhat familiar. Is this uranium ore?
Su Len looked at the ores in front of him with a look of surprise.
Although the radiation on it was very weak, he still recognized it. The last time he opened the box, he got some fuel for the elemental furnace from the system. The energy fluctuation in it was very similar to these ores. Sorry, Your Majesty, the master didn't tell us what this ore is. The Tauren shook his head in confusion. Su Len didn't pay attention to him. He reached out and picked up the ore, then used identification on the ore. Soon, the identification result appeared in front of him. It was indeed uranium ore, but the content of uranium was very low. The raw material for the elemental furnace. It seems that my luck is really good. Su Len thought for a moment. It was difficult to use elemental fuel of this concentration directly, but he could slowly purify it in the future. Isolate this mining area, and let people explore the reserves of the mine as soon as possible. After explaining the matters of the mine, Su Len left the underground mining area and went to the Northwind Spire. Northern Citadel was now very prosperous. The manager of the city was Karina. Su Luen just realized that this drow was actually a management expert. She managed the whole city in good order. Hathaway had mainly focused on studying all kinds of wizardry knowledge. The core task of the Wizard Tower now was to build a floating city. After several years of development, the Northwind Spire had become a lot more popular. A large number of wizard apprentices were studying here. When they saw Su Len, they couldn't help but slightly bow to him and respectfully said, "Mr. Su Len." "Your Excellency." "Mr. Su Len." Su Luen nodded slightly to these wizard apprentices. These wizard apprentices were the best cheap labor force in the Wizard Tower. They were responsible for many things that the golems couldn't do. Su Luen gave them some encouragement and made them work harder. Soon, Su Len arrived at the reception hall of the Northwind Spire. He saw a few wizards in purple robes sitting inside. They had a few shining stars on their badges, and there was even a faint starlight around them. Needless to say, Su Len guessed that these were the wizards of the Starry Spire. As if sensing Sullen's gaze, the leading wizard turned his head. An old face appeared in front of Su Len. Although he looked old, the energy waves on his body were very strong. There seemed to be stars in his eyes. The wizard nodded to Su Len and showed a very friendly smile. There were a few other wizards around him, but their robes were not as luxurious as his. However, Su Len found that the weakest among them was a high-grade wizard. The strongest old man was even a legendary wizard. Hathaway saw Su Len come in and greeted him with a smile. "Su Len, you're here." Su Len nodded gently and followed Hathaway to the empty seat next to her.
Hathaway nodded. "These are the visiting wizards of the Starry Spire?"
Su Len asked through the telepathic link. "They just came here to communicate?" "The wizards of the Starry Spire want to sign an alliance treaty with us." "An alliance treaty? Is there a war?" "No, it should be to deal with the elemental tide. After the appearance of the elemental tide, magical beasts have appeared everywhere. Even the demons in the lower planes have become restless. They want to unite more forces to fight against these enemies." Chapter 640. In the hall, almost all the wizards of the North Wind Tower were there, including Hathaway, Alex Su Len, Wizard Lorraine, and Wizard Andre. Although there were not many of them, their quality was much better. With the help of sufficient resources in Northtown City, these two wizards had also been promoted to Grade 4, but they still had a long way to go before they could become legendary. Legendary wizards could not be made by piling up resources. On the opposite side of the long table were the wizards of the Star Cluster Tower. These wizards of the Star Cluster Tower were surrounded by strange starlight, which should be the effect of their special meditation method. Su Len sat on the main seat, looked around and said in a deep voice, "Now that everyone is here, let's start the formal meeting. You have all come from afar. As the master of the North Wind Tower, I welcome you to come for an exchange.
Thank you, Master Su Len, for your warm hospitality.
Wizard Victor said with a smile. We came here for two purposes.
One is to exchange some knowledge with the North Wind Tower, and the other is to form an alliance with the North Wind Tower. I think you have already felt that the power of the elemental tide is getting stronger and stronger. We estimate that it will reach its peak in the next 1 or 2 years, and then it will continue for 100 or 200 years, and then the elemental tide will gradually decline again. And during this period of time when the elemental tide is rapidly rising, it can be said to be the most dangerous period. The appearance of the elemental tide has caused many sealed ancient evils to become active again. It will be very difficult to deal with these ancient evils by relying on our own strength. And once these ancient evils break the seal, it will be a disaster for our entire world. In this case, we should unite and work together to fight against these ancient evils. I don't need to say more about how dangerous the ancient evil is. This monster was the most dangerous monster even in the era of the Arcane Empire. Although it has been sealed for a long time and the power of these monsters has been reduced to the freezing point, the consequences can be very serious if you're not careful.
Ancient evils are indeed difficult to deal with.
Su Len nodded and said, in principle, we agree with this alliance, but there are still some issues to be discussed.
Then there was a lot of discussion in the hall. Su Len was still optimistic about the alliance of the Stellar Spire. The Stellar Spire belonged to the academic sorcerers, not the notorious black sorcerers. The Stellar Spire had a good reputation in the Wizard Academy. The Academy's most famous spell was the Meteorite spell. It was a powerful spell that could directly summon a meteorite from the astral plane to attack. This spell could easily destroy a city. They were proficient in astrology, divination, evocation, and so on. His combat strength was still very strong. If they were black wizards, Su Luan would not sit here with them at all. Black wizards believed in the law of the jungle and survival of the fittest. Su Luan did not trust them to sign an alliance agreement with them and guard against backstabbing by these black wizards. Next, the two sides began to discuss some specific details, mainly about the things that both sides needed to pay and the benefits that they would receive. It stipulated that both sides would not invade each other, and the two academies could trade with each other. During the trade, they would receive more favorable terms than others. If one side was attacked, they would need to send people to help. After some discussion, the two sides finally reached a cooperation agreement. Next, both sides signed the alliance agreement. The Northern Wind Spire and the Stellar Spire became allies. Since the agreement has been signed, let's give the Northern Wind Spire a greeting gift. Wizard Victor let out a long sigh of relief after seeing the agreement was signed. Greeting gift. Su Len was a little curious. Wizard Victor smiled and signaled to a wizard next to him.
Afterward, that wizard gently waved his hand. An array of light flashed on his body.
Afterward, a large amount of light quickly gathered into a 3D map that appeared on top of the hall. This 3D map is an ancient map collected by the Stellar Spire. It recorded the location of some ancient monsters that were sealed in the ancient times. Victor pointed at the map and explained to Su Len and the others. This also includes the Northern Wasteland. Now, we are showing the location of one of the ancient monsters that was sealed in the Northern Wasteland. Everyone, please take a look. This sealed monster is called the Evil Eye Tyrant. Victor pointed at the location on the map and said, according to the information passed down by the Stellar Spire, this is a demigod-level Evil Eye Tyrant. It is also said that it has a part of the evil god's power. Although this monster has been sealed for thousands of years, its power is still very strong. According to our calculations, this ancient monster will awaken in the near future and break the seal. In order to show the sincerity of the Stellar Spire, we are willing to fight this ancient monster together with the Northern Wind Spire. The spoils of war will be divided according to the merits of both sides. Evil Eye Tyrant. Su Len glanced at the 3D map. On the map, there was an obvious red light spot. This light spot was the location where the Evil Eye Tyrant was sealed. The demigod-level Evil Eye Tyrant was indeed very strong. This kind of Evil Eye was the best among the Eye Demons, and the Evil Eye Tyrant was the king among them. This kind of monster had a strong mind control power and was proficient in all kinds of ray spells. It was very difficult to deal with. However, it had been sealed for so long, so this Evil Eye Tyrant's strongest power was basically useless. The reason why the Evil Eye Tyrant was dangerous was that they could forcefully control a large number of monsters. An Evil Eye Tyrant could easily enslave a large number of monsters and form a monster army.
Now that it was sealed, even if it was a monster army, most of them would have died after thousands of years.
The current evil eye tyrant was a general without an army. As long as one was careful, it would not be difficult to deal with it. Thank you very much for your information. I will send people to investigate as soon as possible. If there is really an evil eye tyrant there, I will deal with it immediately. Su Len said confidently. All right, if you encounter any difficulties, please ask us for help at any time. Victor nodded and said. Since he knew that there was an ancient monster that was ready to make a move, Su Len did not delay and immediately sent people to investigate. At the same time, he also asked the Northern Wind Spire to prepare for war. A demigod-level monster was not so easy to deal with. At the same time, Su Len did not plan to ask the Stellar Spire for help. The main reason was that if they were to interfere with such a demigod-level monster, they would definitely receive a lot of benefits in the end. Especially the divine power. Su Len did not want to share it with others. Chapter 641. All right. Victor wasn't surprised when he heard that Su Len was going to deal with the evil eye tyrant himself. After all, there were at least 3 legendary wizards in front of him. After the discussion ended, Su Len left the hall. The wizards of the Stellar Spire were arranged to rest in the city. These wizards of the Stellar Spire were going to stay in the Northern Wind Spire for a while. Both sides were going to take some time out from tomorrow to exchange knowledge. Su Len was very interested in the knowledge of the Stellar Spire. After all, a wizard school with a legendary wizard in charge and thousands of years of heritage must have accumulated incredible knowledge, such as spells like meteorite. It wasn't easy to obtain legendary spells. Many wizard organizations regarded these spells as important assets. Because legendary spells were very destructive, some wizard organizations even came up with a treaty to prevent the spread of large-scale destructive spells. The treaty required wizard organizations or individuals who had mastered large-scale destructive spells to not transfer or exchange their knowledge with other wizard organizations or individuals in any form. This included, but was not limited to, directly or indirectly learning these spells from other organizations or individuals. The Druids were very supportive of this treaty. After all, these powerful spells were very destructive to nature. Many wizard organizations joined this treaty, but there were also some that didn't. However, because of these wizard organizations, the difficulty of obtaining legendary spells skyrocketed. These wizard organizations used the knowledge of legendary spells as bait to attract wandering legendary wizards or wizards who didn't have any heritage to join them. For this organization, the Northern Wind Spire was at a disadvantage. It made it very difficult for Su Len and Hathaway to exchange legendary spells. Fortunately, Hathaway's previous school also had some legendary spells. Otherwise, after becoming a legendary wizard, Hathaway wouldn't even know any legendary spells. Because Hathaway was also a sorcerer, she awakened a few legendary spells after becoming a legendary wizard. Hathaway did a lot of research and experiments to reverse engineer these spells. She even asked Chrissy and Alex to perform the derivation. With this method, the Northern Wind Spire finally had a few legendary spells in their hands. Su Len didn't get any legendary spells from the system treasure chest he opened, so legendary spells were still quite rare in the Northern Wind Spire. The Stellar Spire had a lot of legendary spells stored in it. Outside the Northern Wind Spire, Wizard Victor suddenly called out to Su Len, who was about to leave, and said softly, "Mr. Su Len, can I talk to you alone for a moment?" Sure.
Su Len thought for a moment and nodded in agreement.
What do you want to talk about? Wizard Victor glanced around and walked to Abel's side. He lowered his voice and said, "Let's go to my room and talk for a bit." Go to your room? At that moment, Su Len seemed to have remembered something, and he suddenly felt a chill down his spine. He immediately rejected the idea. No. You're not a pretty girl. Why should I go to your room? Plus, you're an old man. I have a special guest room. Don't worry, no one will eavesdrop. All right then. Wizard Victor was a little confused by Sullen's reaction, but he still nodded in agreement. The two quickly left and arrived at Sullen's palace guest room. After Angela and Anna left with tea and snacks, only Su Len and Victor were left in the room. Su Len snapped his finger, and a flash of light appeared. Soon, the entire room was covered by an energy barrier. After the spell was cast, Su Len made a gesture to Wizard Victor. Wizard Victor did not hesitate. The magic staff in his hand flashed, and an energy barrier rose from his body. In the blink of an eye, the entire room was also covered. After making sure that no one was spying on them, Victor smiled at Su Len and said, "Okay, we can start now." "Mr. Su Len. It's nice to meet you." Victor solemnly made a mage salute to Su Luan, and Su Luan also became serious and gave him a salute in return. "It's nice to meet you, Mr. Victor. Let me reintroduce myself. My name is Victor, and I am an astrologer. I never thought that I would be able to meet you in my lifetime, someone outside of fate." "Someone outside of fate?" Su Len slightly raised his eyebrows. He knew a little about this title. Wizards also did some research on fate. This was the knowledge of the language school. Hathaway was also from this school. The northern witches were very famous for their prophecy spells. In the research of the language school, they found that most people's fate was already determined when they were born. Maybe they could make some changes, but there was a limit to this change. Of course, this limit was already very big in the eyes of ordinary people. Under normal circumstances, a person's fate was like flipping a coin. When it landed, it would either be heads or tails. However, there were very few people who had the power to change fate. In the study of prophecy, after these coins were flipped, they would land upright, neither heads nor tails. This kind of person had more initiative in fate. They could rely on their own power to change the path of fate. It could be said that this kind of person had more freedom than the gods. Although the gods were very powerful, they were not free. They were also bound by fate. This kind of person was not within the observation range of prophecy spells. Strictly speaking, Su Len was indeed a person who was not within fate. After all, Su Len was a traveler. His soul was not a matter of this world. Therefore, he was not on the line of fate of this world. Someone outside of fate. Su Len looked up and down at the astrologer in front of him. He looked like a wise old man. Although he looked very old, Su Len could clearly feel the abundant vitality in his body. Even a young man in his 20s could not compare to him. Obviously, this old man's appearance was deliberately presented by him. As long as he wanted to, there were many ways to prevent him from aging. Wizards of the School of Prophecy were generally very old because many prophecy spells consumed vitality. Su Len curled his lips and said, "You wizards of the School of Prophecy like to predict the future. How come you found something this time?" "I wanted to see the future of the Tower of the North Wind, but when I used the prophecy spell, I found that it was blank. At first, I thought the spell had failed, but later, I found that the spell could not predict your future." Chapter 642. I think the stupidest people among the Magi are you divination school members. Su Len shook his head and said, "You spend a lot of time and effort to study the future, but in the end, all you see are fragments, and these fragments may not necessarily appear. If you have time, why don't you pick up a girl and talk about life or research spells? If you are strong enough to break free from the shackles of fate, then you will no longer be affected by fate. You can even influence fate." Break free from the shackles of fate? Hearing Su Len's words, Victor was stunned for a moment. He then murmured, "But how can we break free from the shackles of fate?" After a while, Victor woke up from his contemplation, adjusted his mood and looked at Su Luan. "Mr. Su Len, I'm here to exchange some important knowledge with you. The Northwind Tower has been established for less than 5 years. Although they have a few powerful legendary wizards, they don't have much legendary knowledge. We, the Stella Tower, have a lot of knowledge in this regard," Victor said with a smile. "Then what do you want from me?" Su Len was very interested in the bargaining chip that Victor had put out, but there was no free lunch in this world, so they definitely wanted something from the Northwind Tower. "That depends on what knowledge the Northwind Tower can provide. I've paid attention to your Northwind Tower, and I'm amazed by the speed of your rise. In just a few short years, you've built such a prosperous city and this legendary tower in this barren wasteland," Victor said. Su Len quietly listened to Victor's narration without any intention of interrupting. He also wanted to know what other people thought of the Northwind Tower. "Mr. Su Len." Victor hesitated for a moment and said, "I don't know if I can ask you some questions. Of course, if you think it's too difficult, you don't have to answer. Just pretend you didn't hear anything. Tell me about it. If I can answer, I will." Su Luan nodded and said non-committally. Victor thought for a moment, then slowly said, "Sir Su Len, do you have an ability that can make people advance quickly? The strength of the army under your command is very amazing, but they were not much different from ordinary people before.
My speed of promotion is so fast that I can only be a genius, but 1 or 2 geniuses are not impossible.
But in this scale of thousands of people, not everyone is a genius, right? That's my secret. I can't tell you. Su Len shrugged and refused. All right. I don't mean to pry into your secrets. I'm just curious. Victor was not surprised to hear Su Len's refusal. If he knew such a secret, he would not share it with others. All right, let's get down to business. As you know, Sir Su Len, the other adept organizations have signed a treaty to not spread powerful spells. It's not easy to get legendary spells now. We're willing to trade, but we're taking a big risk, Victor said.
Su Len shook his head and said with a chuckle, I know about the so-called treaty to not spread powerful spells, but the Stellar Spire did not sign this agreement.
So, there is no violation of the agreement, so this is just a normal transaction.
Next, the 2 men completely tore off their disguises.
They were like merchants and peddlers, constantly haggling over every ounce. They wanted to get more benefits from each other, but the 2 men had obviously met their opponents. After a dispute, they finally reached an agreement. The North Wind Tower took out the information of the Floating Space Tower in exchange for legendary spells with the Stellar Spire. Although the Stellar Spire had a long history, they did not have the technical information of the Floating Space Tower.
They had always wanted to get the technology of the Floating Space Tower, but the adept organizations that had the technology of the Floating Space Tower did not want to see other adept organizations have such a big weapon, so they did not sell it.
The transaction between the 2 sides could be regarded as complementary. Su Len used the technology of the Floating Space Tower to get a lot of legendary spell knowledge from the Stellar Spire. With this knowledge, the strength of the North Wind Tower would be greatly improved. Of course, Su Len did not trade the knowledge of the elemental furnace. It was the energy center that could be installed on the Floating Space City. He traded the technology of the Floating Space Tower because the technology of the Floating Space Tower was more advanced in the North Town. Even if others mastered it, there would be a big gap between them and the North Wind Tower. Su Len's way of trading these technical knowledge was completely learned from his previous life.
Before he mastered more powerful and advanced knowledge and technology, he would not trade the current technology. The technology that could be traded was usually 1 or 2 generations behind the technology.
The North Wind Tower had to stay ahead of the game. Su Luen didn't even sell the Enigma technology.
What he gave Victor was the early Enigma technology, which covered an area of about 1 kilometer.
It couldn't be used on the Floating Space City, but it was just right for the Floating Space Tower. After getting the 3-dimensional map from Victor, Su Len attached great importance to the Evil Eye Tyrant marked on the map. After the meeting, he arranged for people to investigate. Because of the elemental tide, many monsters that were sealed in ancient times were reawakened. The Evil Eye Tyrant was one of them. Although he did not break the seal, if he was given more time, he would definitely succeed. If the Evil Eye Tyrant took the initiative to reawaken, the final consequences would be very serious. So the best way was to get rid of them before they broke the seal. Of course, it was also possible to strengthen the seal, but these seals left behind in ancient times were seriously damaged. It was not easy to repair them. So Su Len chose another way, which was to get rid of these ancient monsters directly. The Stellar Spire had many monsters sealed in ancient times. These monsters would use their power to corrupt humans or other intelligent races, especially the Evil Eye Tyrant. This guy could easily summon an army of monsters. This guy was as annoying as a spirit-sucking monster. Su Len did not want to let him rest before he attacked. Moreover, this thing was also a very important material. The eye of the Evil Eye Tyrant was very precious. This kind of legendary Evil Eye was rare. Su Len had already planned to make the Evil Eye Tyrant's eye into a magic item after killing it. Chapter 643. Kingdom of Florence, San Filto City. It had been more than a year since the last turmoil. At this time, there were no traces of war in San Filto City. Under the leadership of Su Len and Phyllis, this ancient city was full of vitality. A large city would attract farmers from other places to gather here. The population of San Filto City had reached an astonishing 300,000 people. San Filto City was now very prosperous. The streets were clean and tidy, and there was an endless stream of people. There was a dazzling array of goods, and every street was patrolled by city guards. In addition, the gangs and other underworld forces of the past had all been eliminated. The security of the city was very good. Phyllis was very satisfied with the current San Filto City. Night fell. Queen Phyllis returned to the palace. She didn't know if it was because she had to deal with too many government affairs today, but she felt inexplicably irritable. The surrounding maids also noticed that Her Majesty seemed to be in a bad mood, so they were all very cautious. They were afraid that something wrong would make Her Majesty angry. Seeing that it was still early, Phyllis didn't go back to rest. Instead, she went to the training ground. She took off her luxurious clothes and changed into tight-fitting clothes. She was ready to practice martial arts in the training ground to vent her irritation. She picked up a training iron oak sword and began to attack the wooden targets in the training ground as if she was venting her frustrations. She hit a few wooden dummies with loud bangs. Bang! Finally, a loud sound was heard. These wooden targets made of iron oak and reinforced were completely shattered by Phyllis. After venting, Phyllis finally felt less irritable. However, this was only temporary.
Soon, a wave of irritation rose in her heart, and this wave of irritation was stronger than before.
If this happened in Northern Town, she would ask Hathaway for the reason. Now, she wanted to try to solve it by herself. Soon, Phyllis came to the bathroom in the palace. The clear spring water made people feel a chill. As soon as she came here, she wanted to jump in and have a swim. Phyllis immediately prepared to take off her clothes. Slash! There was a sound of cloth tearing. Because she was too anxious, Phyllis used too much strength and tore her clothes. Since it was already ruined, Phyllis simply tore it apart and appeared naked in the room. The next second, Phyllis jumped into the water like a mermaid. Crash! Phyllis swam quickly in the cool spring water. The coolness of the spring water dispelled the heat in her body, but soon, an even stronger heat rose in her heart.
What's going on? Why is it so hot?
Phyllis emerged from the pool. Her jade-white skin had become rosy, and even the spring water on her body was emitting wisps of steam. Looking at her reflection in the pool, Phyllis knew that something was wrong with her body. At the same time, she felt as if something was stuck in her throat. She wanted to sneeze but couldn't. That feeling was unbearable. Phyllis raised her hand and rubbed her fair neck. She felt as if there were countless worms crawling in her throat. Finally, the discomfort seemed to have reached a critical point. Phyllis finally sneezed out. Whoosh! A flame more than 3 feet long was spat out from her mouth. Ah! The sudden appearance of the flame directly scared Phyllis. The originally cool spring water was instantly evaporated by the flame, and the whole room was instantly filled with clouds of steam. However, the flame disappeared as quickly as it came. After the flame disappeared, the steam in the room dissipated quickly. Phyllis looked at herself in surprise. Just after she spat out the flame, the heat in her body had completely disappeared. At this time, she understood that the dragon bloodline in her body had awakened. What she spat out just now was the dragon's breath. Thinking of this, Phyllis took a deep breath again. Then she opened her mouth and spat out another scorching flame. The high temperature evaporated a large amount of the spring water, but soon, the flame disappeared. Compared to the first time she spat out the dragon's breath this time was obviously much smaller. Being able to spit out the dragon's breath for the first time, Phyllis's warlock bloodline was obviously very good. At the same time, she could clearly feel the powerful beating of her heart. After understanding that this was the awakening of her bloodline, Phyllis became happy. Then, he kept touching his body, as if trying to find something different. After a while, Phyllis said with a look of regret, "Why didn't I grow wings?" Dragon warlocks could indeed awaken dragon wings, but they had to wait until they reached the 4th stage of their bloodline. Currently, Phyllis was only at the 3rd stage, so it was impossible for her to awaken dragon wings. After washing herself in the pool, Phyllis put on her bathrobe and left the room. Now that the heat was gone, she was in a good mood. Humming a song, she walked towards the bedroom. However, when she opened the door, she accidentally broke the brass handle of the door with a crack. My strength increased again? Looking at the broken door handle in her hand, Phyllis was a little dumbfounded, but soon became excited. She put a little force in her hand and left a few clear finger marks on the bronze door handle. The hard metal door handle was kneaded into various shapes by her like plasticine. My strength increased by so much. Phyllis's eyes flashed with a trace of surprise. Phyllis was very happy about the strengthening of her body. Not only did she awaken dragon's breath, but her strength also increased greatly. Of course, the strength of her dragon's breath was far from that of a giant dragon. After all, a dragon warlock was not a giant dragon, Generally speaking, a dragon warlock could spit out dragon's breath once or twice a day according to their own ability. When they became stronger, they could spit out dragon's breath up to 3 times. However, the power of dragon's breath was much weaker than that of a giant dragon. Of course, the power of dragon's breath would increase little by little with the strength of the dragon warlock. When a dragon warlock's power was awakened to a certain extent, the attack range and lethality of dragon's breath would be greatly increased. When a dragon warlock reached the legendary level, the dragon's breath could directly wipe out all life within dozens of meters in front of him. This attack did not require any casting. It only required a deep breath to release. It was convenient, fast, and powerful. If the opponent was not prepared, they could be spat in the face. After a dragon warlock awakened dragon's breath, some spell-like abilities began to awaken. It would not be long before Phyllis learned some spells. Chapter 644. When Phyllis awakened her dragon breath, the scouting team Sulen sent out came back with some news. There were indeed some problems with the ancient ruin that Wizard Victor gave him. After confirming that this place was indeed different, the war machine of the northern battlefront city immediately began to operate. Large amounts of information were continuously sent to the northern wind tower. The seal in the ruins that they had discovered this time was also extremely damaged. The evil eye tyrant's power was already leaking out of the seal. If no one disturbed him, he would be able to successfully break through the seal in no time. Even some of the beasts in the surroundings had mutated to varying degrees under the power of the evil eye tyrant. The northern town city also sent out a group of soldiers to clear out these mutated beasts. These mutated beasts were not very powerful, but there were a lot of them. It was just nice for the soldiers to practice. He didn't want to see these soldiers not seeing blood when they were on the battlefield. On the astrology platform, Sulen nodded at Hathaway and said, "Let's begin." Then, Hathaway and Alex began to cast spells together. Soon, a ray of light rose up, and a tall teleportation gate appeared in front of them. As the teleportation gate opened, Sulen walked in first. Following behind him were the 36 iron golems. These iron golems were used for combat testing. This evil eye tyrant was about to break free. He was already very powerful. It was very likely that he had already controlled many powerful creatures. These creatures were just nice to test the strength of the iron golems. After the northern wind tower formed the iron golem army, they had not tested the strength of the army. This was a good opportunity to test it out. The 36 iron golems stepped into the teleportation gate in an orderly manner and appeared at the outpost that the northern town city built. The outer area of the seal had been cleared out by the vanguard of the northern town city, but they did not get close to the core area of the seal. The monsters in the core area were obviously much more powerful. It was not something that these new soldiers could deal with. These new soldiers of the northern town city were just here to practice and level up. Sulen and the 36 iron golems appeared in the camp. This camp was a little simple. The surrounding scenery looked very desolate. The land was barren, and the ground was yellow. It looked very similar to the Gobi Desert. The camp was filled with the smell of blood. Sulen saw many dismembered monster corpses. These mutated monsters would more or less have some parts of their bodies that were enchanted materials. Naturally, these materials would be collected and brought back to the apprentice sorcerers for experiments or to make some potions. After taking a look at the surroundings, Sulen did not stop. He ordered the demonic statue army to head into the depths of the sealed land. The 36 steel demonic statues were like walking steel walls. They were about 4 meters tall and weighed over 3 tons. Their surfaces were covered by a layer of silvery white magical metal. This layer of metal armor was extremely sturdy, and they were also equipped with various weapons. The battle prowess of a steel demonic statue was basically equivalent to that of a conferred knight, which was equivalent to a level 4 extraordinary human. The 36 steel golems moved together, and the mutant beasts in front of the steel golems were no match for them. As the steel golems swung their swords, the mutant beasts in their path were crushed, and the mutant beasts were flattened by the steel golems. After discovering these steel golems, the mutant beasts kept on attacking them. However, these attacks did not even leave a scratch on the steel golems. Just then, a black cloud drifted over from the distant sky. It was only when Sulen got closer that he realized that it was not a black cloud but several hundred bats with blood-red eyes. Bloodthirsty demonic bats. Seeing these bats, Sulen frowned slightly. Similar to the diamond golems, the steel golems did not have the ability to fight in the air. Their limited magic attacks were poison gas and fire rays.
Their ability to fight in the air was very poor.
The bloodthirsty demonic bats were astonishingly large, with a wingspan of 5 to 6 meters. Demonic bats of this size looked like pterosaurs, but they were much more agile than pterosaurs. The bloodthirsty demonic bats had a row of sharp fangs and claws.
They could also spread diseases. In places where technology was not developed, these bloodthirsty demonic bats could kill thousands or even tens of thousands of people.
You think you're the only one with an air force? Su Len curled his lips, then waved his hand to open a teleportation gate. Then, the sound of a pair of wings flapping could be heard. Shadows flew out of the teleportation gate one after another. As soon as these shadows appeared, they rushed towards the black cloud not far away. It was the gargoyle golems from the Northwind Tower. These gargoyle golems flew over in groups and soon clashed with the Air Force. These gargoyles were very powerful. Their obsidian bodies could resist almost all the attacks of these mutant beasts. And their sharp claws could easily tear these mutant beasts to pieces.
Soon, bats kept falling from the sky and were killed by the steel golems that had already been prepared.
The golem army of Northwind City kept advancing, leaving behind a large number of incomplete epics. A large number of enemies have appeared. Activate the second battle plan. Poison gas spray. A gust of magic energy flashed from the steel golems, and then a large amount of poison gas began to spray out in all directions from these steel golems. The poison gas connected with each other and soon formed an astonishing poisonous miasma. A large number of mutant beasts in the miasma were corroded by the poison gas, and then began to die in groups. The poison gas of the steel golems was very powerful. The poison gas was almost as powerful as the breath of a young green dragon. The terrible death gas covered a large area of the battlefield, and groups of mutant beasts kept dying. The effect of this poisonous gas was very good. The strength of this poisonous gas was very good. Even those powerful warriors would not be able to move around here for a long time. Su Len followed the golem army and advanced.
Next to him, there was a steel golem that was collecting all kinds of data.
This steel golem was a clone of the tower spirit, Milky Way. The main body of the tower spirit could not leave the wizard tower, so part of its power was added to the steel golem and used it to collect information. After the information was collected, it would be gathered and sent to the tower spirit 1. Then, the data would be sorted out, and the weaknesses would be improved. This time, the gargoyle golems and the steel golems worked together to obtain a lot of information.
The tower spirit Milky Way also began to simulate the battle, using this method to quickly strengthen the golem army.
Chapter 645. Enemy detected. Activating battle command. Add powerful strike. Add cleave. Add defense to offense. Add total annihilation. Add charge. Large-scale enemy detected. Activating energy attack. The steel golems raised their arms one after another. Their palms suddenly opened, revealing black holes. In the next second, these black holes emitted heart-palpitating energy fluctuations. Dazzling spiritual lights flickered, and energy beams shot out from the hands of the steel golems. Rumble! A deafening explosion sounded, and the mutated monsters that were originally charging at the steel golems suffered heavy casualties under this saturated energy attack. The steel golem's energy attack was very powerful, and its effect was equivalent to the power of a level 4 to level 5 spell. The mutated monsters that were originally charging at them were all blown up, and the steel golem's powerful strength pushed all the enemies away. These steel golems formed a combat squad of 6, and formed a great wall of steel that kept pushing forward, not caring that the mutated monsters were dozens of times their number. These mutated monsters were originally ordinary animals, but after being infected by the evil energy of the Evil Eye Tyrant, they mutated. Although their strength was not bad, for the steel golems, these mutated monsters' attack power could not even break through their defense. The steel golems had extremely strong physical resistance, and the claws of the mutated monsters only left shallow scratches on them. Other than that, there was no other effect. These steel golems were immune to poison, sleep, paralysis, intimidation, and instant death effects, and were not affected by heavy hits, fatigue, attribute extraction, and other damage effects. Other than some rust-type spells that were more effective against them, it was very difficult for anyone to sense a steel golem. Moreover, these steel golems were under the command of the tower spirit, Milky Way. In the sky, a group of gargoyle devil statues quickly cut into the rear of these mutated monsters. Magic light flickered continuously, and the mutated monsters of all shapes and sizes were killed one after another. The blood-gorger bats in the sky were simply no match for the gargoyle devil statues. Under the attacks of the numerous devil statues, they were forced to retreat. Su Len raised his head and looked at the sealed area in the distance. Under the attack of the golem army, it was only a matter of time before this sealed area was completely purified. The only variable was the sealed evil eye tyrant. Boom! At this moment, in the depths of the sealed land, the hard ground suddenly rumbled. A deep crack appeared in the ground, and then a powerful energy fluctuation spread out. The seal has failed. Seeing this, Sullen's expression changed slightly. He instantly flew into the air and stared at the crack. Ding! An energy wave has been detected. Intense spatial fluctuations have been detected in the current area. High energy target detected. Target's level is extremely dangerous. Warning! Warning! Unknown dimensional space is collapsing. The seal has lost its effect. It will be completely destroyed in 30 seconds. Evil spirit aura. Spell wave detected. All targets within this domain will have their magic resistance reduced. Chaotic spirit chi. Spell wave detected. Within the range of this domain, all negative magic immunity will be reduced. Material radiation detected. Within the range of this domain, the life force of living beings will be drained at an accelerated rate. Mind control. Interference force field detected. Mind corruption. Interference force field detected. Evil energy force field detected. Ancient evilous energy fluctuation detected. Target is demigod. Ancient evil. As the tower spirit He's sharp alarm sounded, a spatial crack appeared on the original land. Then, the entire battlefield suddenly quietened down. Then, a thin figure squeezed out from the crack. As this figure appeared, the spatial crack behind him began to collapse. A terrifying spiritual fluctuation instantly enveloped this place, and the source of all this was the evil eye tyrant. As soon as the evil eye tyrant appeared, its terrifying aura spread out along with its domain. The entire battlefield was under its influence. This demigod-level evil eye tyrant was indeed very powerful. Those mutated monsters became very fearful under its aura, but it didn't affect the others at all. Other than Su Len, the rest of the people on the battlefield were all golem puppets. These golem puppets were immune to all mind magic, spirit magic, and aura domain of the evil eye tyrant. It could be said that these abilities of his were completely useless. As for Su Len, he activated his lightning domain and directly repelled the evil eye tyrant's domain.
If it was a normal human or magus, in such a terrifying evil domain, there was also the possibility of a mind attack that could appear anytime and anywhere.
Normal magi would not be able to withstand this level of attack at all. They would all feel dizzy, and some would even directly interrupt their spells and cause a magic backlash. The chaotic consciousness would constantly disturb them, provoking their negative emotions. This was the evil eye tyrant's specialty. Facing an enemy of this level, the human wave tactic had long lost its effect. Only magi of the same level could fight against it. Normal magi would all die no matter how many of them came. They might even be directly controlled by the evil eye tyrant. This was also the reason why Su Len only brought golem puppets to fight when he knew that the evil eye tyrant was sealed this time. Although Hathaway and Alex could resist the power of this domain, they were not of much use here. Many crazy and violent thoughts kept appearing in Sullen's mind. These thoughts were constantly disturbing his mind. Su Len frowned slightly. Although these thoughts could not shake his mind, they were like toads lying on the back of his feet. They were not very harmful, but they were extremely humiliating. Damned fellow, get out of my mind! Su Len roared angrily. After that, a powerful magic wave instantly exploded from his body. Rumble! Dazzling lightning descended from the sky. The lightning flashed across the sky. After the evil eye tyrant appeared, the battlefield that was originally shrouded in negative energy was instantly broken apart by the power of countless lightning bolts. Ah! A blood-curdling scream could be heard. Powerful lightning bolts swept across, and countless lightning bolts instantly struck the evil eye tyrant. The evil eye tyrant that had just escaped was instantly surrounded by hundreds of lightning bolts. The negative energy that was originally entangled around its body was constantly being worn down. The mind defense only lasted for a few moments before it was completely shattered. Chapter 646. Other than their ability to corrode, the most troublesome thing about these ancient evils was their tenacious life force. They had been sealed for thousands of years, but they still managed to survive. And when the elemental tide arrived, they broke the seal again. Although it was hit by hundreds of lightning bolts, the evil eye tyrant didn't suffer any serious injuries. As an evil energy exploded from its body, the evil eye tyrant instantly broke free from the lightning attacks. Without the lightning and evil energy surrounding it, the evil eye tyrant finally revealed its true appearance. It was a monster that struck fear in people's hearts. Its skinny body gave off a strange feeling. There was a huge eye on its head, and there were dozens of eye stalks around the eye like the tentacles of an octopus. At the end of the eye stalks, there were many terrifying eyes. The pupils of these eyes flickered with a dim red light. All of the eyes were staring at Su Len. The surrounding mutated monsters had already entered a frenzied state. This was the strengthening of the chaotic will. As long as there were ancient evils, their domain power could strengthen the monsters they enslaved. What a disgusting creature! Su Len frowned as he looked at the evil eye tyrant. Those eyes made one's scalp tingle. In the next second, dozens of red rays shot out from these eyes. Weakening ray. Death ray. Annihilation ray. Psionic ray. Many ray-type spells were released by the evil eye tyrant in an instant. An energy barrier instantly rose in front of Su Len, blocking these energy rays. These rays kept hitting the energy barrier, and then exploded with intense spiritual light before disappearing. Thunder God Domain. Dazzling lightning flashed. Su Len's body was surrounded by lightning. At this moment, he looked like a thunder god from ancient times. Powerful lightning energy surrounded him. Even Su Len's body appeared to be energized at this moment. At this moment, Su Len looked like a god from ancient times. He roared angrily, and the thunder god's spear in his hand stabbed at the evil eye tyrant. The evil eye tyrant's mental barrier shattered like glass. Then, it stabbed one of its eye stalks. The scarlet eye stalk was instantly pierced, and the lightning energy turned it into a pile of charcoal. Ah! A mournful roar instantly erupted from the evil eye tyrant's body. Powerful spiritual energy swept out like a tsunami. Su Len only felt as if his head had been hit heavily by a hammer at this moment. However, he regained his senses in the next instant. Rumble! The evil eye tyrant, who had been attacked by the lightning, became very angry. The entire battlefield was shaking. Su Len had already transformed into a lightning body and was fighting with the evil eye tyrant crazily. Lightning could be seen flashing in the sky. This was a sign that Su Len's body was moving. Powerful shockwaves accompanied by raging winds continued to spread to the surroundings, leaving deep marks on the hard Gobi Desert. The surrounding mutant beasts had suffered heavy casualties, and as the shockwaves of the battle swept across, the mutant beasts were directly torn apart. Su Len's steel army was no longer advancing. Under the control of the tower spirit, Milky Way, they quickly retreated and distanced themselves from Su Len's battle. The evil eye tyrant roared crazily. Waves of spiritual energy swept out. If an ordinary person appeared in the surroundings, their head would explode in the next second. This kind of powerful spiritual energy was very scary. Waves of intense magic waves appeared. Su Len was rapidly battling with the evil eye tyrant while casting spells to weaken the enemy. The shock waves of the battle had already completely destroyed the surroundings. Cracks appeared on the ground, and the area within a few kilometers was filled with violent energy. Although Su Len was constantly casting spells, the damage done to the evil eye tyrant was very limited. After all, in such a high-speed battle, there was no chance for him to cast powerful spells. After all, he was still unable to instantly cast legendary spells. Sizzle sizzle sizzle, dozens of rays filled with negative energy hit Su Len consecutively, directly shattering the layer of energy barrier on his body. It even dyed the ground around him pitch black. What a serious pollution! Su Len frowned as he looked at the puddles of black radiation on the ground. The evil eye tyrant had too many eye stalks. Even if Su Len was prepared, he might not be able to dodge them. Ordinary evil eyes usually only had one main eye and at most 2 or 3 eye stalks. However, the evil eye tyrant in front of him had at least hundreds of eye stalks. This was simply a honeycomb-shaped laser launcher. Once it opened fire, it would attack in all directions. Moreover, the speed of the ray attacks was very fast. If one was not careful, one would be hit by these disgusting rays. The power of ordinary ray attacks were mostly around the 4th or 5th circle. To Su Len, they were not too dangerous. The only thing that made him fearful was the evil eye tyrant's main eye. The evil ray attacks from this main eye were very shocking. Once it was shot out, the sky would fall and the earth would crack. This energy not only had the effect of instant death, but it also carried all the effects of the other secondary eye's rays. This shocking energy had an extremely terrifying attack power. Bottomless pits appeared on the ground one after another. After only 10 minutes of fighting, the scene became very intense. Big B capture palm. Big B crushing palm. 2 consecutive palms that were completely filled with lightning energy appeared in front of him. In the next second, they fiercely attacked the evil eye tyrant that was fighting with Su Len. The evil eye tyrant was sent flying like a fly. After that, another huge palm print directly descended from the sky and directly slammed the evil eye tyrant onto the ground. Streaks of lightning flashed. The evil eye tyrant was stunned by the attack just now. Its body was lifted up and stunned. Dazzling lightning flashed. Ball of destruction. Accompanied by the appearance of a terrifying ball of energy, the evil eye tyrant finally broke free from the power of lightning. However, before it could recover, another ball of lightning fiercely struck it. The evil eye tyrant, who was suppressed and beaten up, was furious. Hundreds of rays once again exploded from the evil eye tyrant's body. The entire battlefield was filled with traces left behind by the battle. Strong acid, fire, ice, weakness, poison. All kinds of energy rays continuously exploded. Lightning spear. Accompanied by the appearance of a powerful lightning energy, the evil eye tyrant seemed to have realized the danger at this moment. Its body kept flashing as it tried to dodge this attack. However, it had already been locked onto by Sullen's soul. It was completely unable to dodge. With a loud bang, it was hit fiercely. Chapter 647. Dazzling lightning streaked across the sky, illuminating the entire sky. The powerful lightning spear brought with it boundless energy as it pierced the evil eye tyrant's body. The boundless power of lightning exploded at this moment, and the evil eye tyrant's body was electrocuted into charcoal. However, the evil eye tyrant's vitality was very tenacious. This kind of serious injury didn't kill it. Balls of evil energy continued to gather and churn on its body. The charcoal part of its body quickly dried up and fell off. According to this situation, it wouldn't take long for it to regrow. Gate between worlds. A powerful evil energy tore through the space. In the next second, a huge and distorted gate between worlds opened. Following that, a terrifying creature that was more than 10 meters tall crawled out of the gate. This creature looked like an abyss demon, but the aura it emitted was obviously different from an abyss demon. Perhaps because its body was too big, the gate between worlds that was a few meters tall was a little difficult to open. This summoned creature had the strength of a high legend. After realizing that the gate between worlds was a little difficult to open, it actually used its claws to open up the surface area of the gate between worlds. After that, it crawled out of the gate. Who summoned me? This monster from another world roared excitedly. Its arms hammered the ground forcefully like thunder. However, in the next second, it felt a strong wave of spiritual energy. When it turned its head and saw the figure of the evil eye tyrant in mid-air, this monster from another world froze. It turned around and wanted to escape back into the gate between worlds. Damn it, why is it the evil eye tyrant? This monster from another world didn't even think about it. It turned around and prepared to escape. However, before it could turn around, that strong evil mind energy had already controlled it. The evil eye tyrant had a strong mind control ability. It was said that this monster was related to the spirit-sucking monster by blood. This monster's mind control ability was shockingly strong. In those records, every evil eye tyrant could control a large number of creatures. If they were given enough time, an evil eye tyrant could form a powerful monster army. The evil eye tyrant's shocking mind control ability allowed them to easily control a large number of creatures. Even giant dragons could be controlled. Roar! The otherworld creature controlled by the evil eye tyrant rose into the air and quickly jumped towards Su Len. It looked as if it wanted to tear Su Len apart. The otherworld creature that was more than 10 meters tall was even larger than the giants in the material plane. It could be said that it was only second to the giant dragons. Su Len narrowed his eyes at the sight of the advanced legendary level otherworldly demon. The Thunder God's spear in his hand emitted dazzling lightning, and in a flash, he appeared in midair. The Thunder God's spear swept forward with an indomitable momentum. The otherworldly demon's body was instantly surrounded by lightning, and then it was directly sent flying. He actually found a helper. Su Len looked at the evil eye tyrant and the otherworldly demon in front of him. Then, a dazzling lightning suddenly exploded from his body. Tower Spirit Milky Way has locked onto the coordinates. Activating the portal. Open the portal. Prepare the magic breaker. Charging complete. Teleportation in progress. A beam of light descended from the sky, and in the next second, the magic breaker statue appeared in front of Su Len. The magic breaker has arrived at the designated location. Target creature discovered. Activating battle form. The moment the magic breaker statue puppet appeared, it immediately launched an attack. The heavy statue had an unexpected speed, and it instantly rushed towards the otherworldly demon. Magic breaker blade beginning to charge. Charging complete. Activating magic breaker blade. Weakness detection complete. Greater haste spell complete. Battle form activated. Current battle form can only be maintained for 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Countdown begins. The magic breaker statue activated its ultimate battle form, and a beam of light flashed past. Then, the magic breaker charged towards the battlefield at an astonishing speed. The magic breaker blade in its hand also emitted a purple energy blade. This energy blade's power was very shocking, and the otherworldly demon's skin was completely unable to block this weapon. As the magic breaker moved quickly, wounds continuously appeared on the demon's body. Seeing that the otherworldly demon was restrained by the magic breaker statue, Su Len once again launched an attack on the evil eye tyrant. Countless lightning bolts descended from the sky, and the evil eye tyrant's psionic barrier was constantly shattered and reformed. Its body was constantly trembling under these attacks. Su Len's figure moved quickly, and he constantly attacked the evil eye tyrant from all sides. However, suddenly, after the evil eye tyrant forcefully took an attack from Su Len, its octopus-like tentacles did not care about the powerful lightning damage, and tightly wrapped around the Thunder God's spear. The powerful lightning power directly charred its tentacles. The evil eye tyrant's main eye instantly aimed at Su Len, and in the next second, a fatal ray shot towards his head quickly. A sense of danger rose in Su Len's heart, and his body subconsciously wanted to dodge, but the Thunder God's spear was tightly gripped, and this affected his movements. The sixth sense talent worked once again, and Su Len successfully dodged the evil ray at the moment when it was about to hit him. This evil ray brushed past the protective spell on the surface of Su Len's body, and instantly shattered the protective energy field on his body. At the same time, it left a bottomless pit where Su Len had been standing just now. After dodging this attack, Su Len's body instantly exploded with an even stronger power than before. The entire Thunder God's spear seemed to have completely turned into lightning, and the rolling thunderclouds in the sky gathered together, and then instantly descended. At this moment, Su Len's body even expanded by another layer, and dazzling lightning gathered on his body. The Thunder God's spear in his hand directly turned the evil eye tyrant's tentacles into charcoal. Su Len let out a furious roar towards the sky, and in the next second, his body completely turned into a bolt of lightning, and charged towards the evil eye tyrant. Accompanied by an extremely violent energy wave, a shocking purple energy beam exploded from Su Len's body. The speed of this beam was extremely fast, and the evil eye tyrant had no time to dodge at all. It could only use its full strength to activate its spiritual energy defense field. But this spiritual energy defense field that could originally block an 8th circle spell was like a bubble at this moment, and was lightly pierced. Following this shocking energy beam ruthlessly pierced towards the evil eye tyrant without any resistance. The evil eye tyrant wanted to teleport away, but in this instant, the surrounding energy barrier was completely locked down, and accompanied by an extremely violent explosion, a huge hole was directly opened in the evil eye tyrant's body. The powerful energy directly pierced through the evil eye tyrant's body, and even the various parts of its body were turned into charcoal by the lightning power. Chapter 648. Rumble. A huge explosion could be heard. Su Len's fatal attack had an energy level that completely exceeded the range of a level 9 spell. It had reached a shocking level 10, or even higher. The evil eye tyrant that took Su Len's full force attack immediately entered a state of near death. More than half of its body was damaged by this attack, but the huge eye on its head didn't receive any damage. Su Len deliberately avoided that area when he attacked. The evil eye tyrant was very powerful. The most valuable part of its body was its eye. Su Len didn't want to spend so much effort to kill this thing and not get any benefits. Su Len didn't give the evil eye tyrant time to recover. After completing that shocking attack, he didn't care about the feeling of emptiness in his body. The Thunder God's spear in his hand released dazzling lightning and directly destroyed the evil eye tyrant's body. After killing this evil eye tyrant, Su Len also heaved a sigh of relief. A sense of powerlessness rose in his body. This was because he had used too much energy in a short period of time, which caused him to be exhausted. With his powerful physique, he could quickly recover. After Su Len successfully killed the evil eye tyrant, the battle of the magic breaker at the side also came to an end. The magic breaker that had activated the magic breaker blade could only fight for 150 seconds. In this short 150 seconds, the magic breaker's power was completely released. Following a dazzling flash of light, the magic breaker swept across its body at an astonishing speed. The otherworldly demon's huge body instantly stiffened on the spot. In the next second, its hideous head slid down. The otherworldly demon's tall body crashed onto the ground, and smelly blood spurted out. After completing the killing, the magic breaker statue slowly stopped. The magic breaker blade's light dissipated, and the magic construct statue's light also slowly disappeared. It returned to its normal state. Su Len didn't relax. Lightning flashed in his hand again. Soul binding technique. A huge magical gemstone instantly flew up, and a terrifying soul covered in eyes was forcefully pulled out from the evil eye tyrant's corpse. Bolts of lightning turned into chains, and successfully bound this terrifying soul. Then, the soul was slowly dragged into the magical gemstone. The evil eye tyrant realized that the situation was not good. That ugly and terrifying soul struggled crazily, trying to escape. But when it was alive, it was not a match for Su Len. Now that it was dead, it was even worse. The evil eye tyrant's soul was dragged and sealed into a magical gemstone. The chains that were originally wrapped around the evil eye tyrant's soul also turned into rays of golden light and instantly fused into the gemstone. The originally pure magic gem turned into a purple soul crystal that flickered with golden light. The faint golden energy within the soul crystal was constantly flickering. This was the divine power in his soul. This was also one of his most valuable things. What made Su Len a little regretful was that the otherworldly demon didn't leave behind a soul crystal. The moment it died, its soul would be sent back to its original place according to the rules of the multiverse. Even if Su Len wanted to use magic to keep its soul, it would be impossible. But even so, this otherworldly demon could be said to have suffered heavy losses. Although it didn't lose its life, it lost a lot of its strength. This time, it lost a large amount of soul energy. Its strength wouldn't be able to increase for a long time. In more serious cases, it might even regress. Ding! Congratulations to the host. You have successfully killed an evil eye tyrant. You have received 397,600 experience points. The battle has ended. You have received a glorious victory. Congratulations to the host. You have successfully killed an evil eye tyrant. You have received 3 diamond treasure chests as a reward. You have received the item spiritual gemstone. Congratulations to the host. Your golem has killed an otherworldly demon. You have received 270,000 experience points as a reward. You have received a diamond treasure chest as a reward. Broken Seal, Advanced Legend Battle, Wuxia Calendar, Year 1686, September. An ancient seal in the north of Northtown City was broken. The sealed monster successfully escaped. If it wasn't dealt with quickly, this ancient evil creature would have started a shocking battle after absorbing enough energy. You have successfully blocked this monster when the seal was broken and killed it in the end. You have received a large amount of reputation from this battle. Your name has been spread across the continent. Hearing the familiar system notification in his ears, Su Len wasn't in a hurry to look at his rewards this time. There were even bigger rewards waiting for him to deal with. Su Len took out a sharp carving knife. He didn't have time to rest and cut off the evil eye tyrant's huge eye. This eye could be said to be the most precious thing on the evil eye tyrant's body apart from its divine power. The evil eye tyrant's main eye was about the size of a soccer ball. It was olive-shaped. After Su Len carefully put away this main eye, he also took back all the secondary eyes on the evil eye tyrant's body. These eyes were extremely useful for Dao Lord spells. After some special treatment, these evil eyes would turn into a gem-like substance. Su Len carefully removed these evil eyes from the evil eye tyrant's corpse. These evil eyes had very good magic conductivity.
After adding some other things, these eyes had become very valuable.
After some special treatment, these evil eyes could be seen as a magic device.
After being activated, they could shoot out all kinds of energy rays.
The evil eye tyrant's main eye was even more precious. This main eye had many uses. It could be used to make a magic energy shooting device.
Because it was made of the main eye, its power was very shocking.
After enough energy was replenished, the attack it shot out could reach the power of an 8-ring weapon. If it was installed in a Magus tower, it would be a huge killing machine.
Of course, this was only the most basic method.
The evil eye's main eye still had many functions that hadn't been used.
Another way to use it was to refine this eye into the omniscient eye. This omniscient eye could see through all kinds of illusionary spells, as well as camouflage, invisibility, and so on.
It could even be discovered if one was hiding in the shadow world. Countless magi wanted to get one of these omniscient eyes and install it in a Magus tower. This way, they wouldn't have to worry about rogues sneaking in.
The omniscient eye could observe everything in a part of the space.
It could also launch attacks.
This kind of thing could be said to be very precious.
Just the materials needed to be legendary. If it were to be sold, the price would be at least a few million kinner. Su Len planned to make this eye into the omniscient eye and install it in a Magus tower. Chapter 649.
The power of the omniscient eye mainly depended on the quality of the eye.
Of course, some high-quality special crystals could also be used as the main body of the omniscient eye. Of course, the best choice was to use the eye of a high-level beholder because the eyes of these high-level monsters had some special abilities that the omniscient eye made from other materials didn't have. Now, using the eye of a demigod creature, the omniscient eye would be at least an advanced legendary magic creation. Su Len quickly removed the main eye of the evil eye tyrant and its dozens of secondary eyes. These secondary eyes were also very good materials. Although they couldn't be used to make the omniscient eye, they could be used to make the scouting eye. The scouting eye was a careful scouting tool. This kind of magic creation was created by combining a type of spell. Wizards had a spell called Spell Eye. They could use this spell to create an eye for scouting. This scouting eye was created by combining this spell. This scouting eye had the ability to become invisible and fly. It could transmit the observed images to the wizard in real time. It was very useful. Many wizards could make some. Of course, due to the different craftsmanship and materials, the quality of these scouting eyes varied. After spending some time, Su Len finally cleaned up the spoils of war. The next step was to completely clear out the mutated monsters here. These mutated monsters were basically mutated by the radiation of the evil eye tyrant's evil energy. A few pairs of secondary eyes grew on their bodies. Of course, most of them were fake eyes and didn't have any abilities.
However, there were some that had mutated seriously and these eyes had special abilities.
Su Len opened the teleportation door and asked Hathaway to send the rock golems from the golem army over. They cleaned up the area thoroughly and made sure that there were no more mutated monsters alive. After that, they left and returned to the North Wind Tower. After leaving the cleaning up to the others, Su Len returned to his room to check out his rewards. After killing the evil eye tyrant and the otherworldly demon, he had obtained a total of 4 diamond treasure chests. Su Len went to take a shower first. After washing his hands 3 times, he returned to his room and sat down to prepare to open the treasure chests. He opened the storage space and chose to open the treasure chest. A beautiful sound and light effect appeared in front of his eyes, followed by a series of system notifications. Congratulations, host. You have successfully opened the diamond treasure chest. You have obtained the item, the relationship between weather and magic. Congratulations, host. You have successfully opened the diamond treasure chest. You have obtained a high-grade legendary soul crystal. Congratulations, host. You have successfully opened the diamond treasure chest. You have obtained the item, Floating City Blueprint. Congratulations, host. You have successfully opened the diamond treasure chest. You have obtained the item, Principles and Application of Energy. As the light dissipated, 4 items appeared in front of Su Len. They were 3 magic books and a soul crystal. No one would complain about having too many soul crystals. He put them away and gave them to Hathaway to create high-level magic statues or tower spirits. He then picked up the 3 magic books of different colors. The relationship between weather and magic seemed to be a theoretical book about weather.
After reading it briefly, Su Len realized that this book was not only about the theory of weather, but also the method of using magic to control and change the climate. In other words, if he fully mastered the content of this book, he could try to change the environment and climate. In the era of the Arcane Empire, the great arcanists had done a lot of things to transform the Bit Wall. They had transformed the Abyss Bit Wall into a place suitable for human habitation. Although the knowledge in this book did not record how to transform the Abyss, the knowledge in this book was still very precious.
It just so happened that Su Len and Hathaway had opened up a half-bit wall. They could experiment with the knowledge in the half-bit wall.
Although this kind of book did not seem to have any lethality, it seemed to be the knowledge of environmental transformation technology.
In fact, it was the only way to study weather weapons. Mastering weather weapons could create natural disasters. This kind of power had already appeared in the era of the Arcane Empire.
The value of this kind of knowledge was higher than those legendary spells.
Su Len simply flipped through it and carefully put it away. This book would be included in the top knowledge of the Tower of the North Wind. After putting away the book, Su Len began to look through the remaining 2 books. Blueprint of a Floating Space City was a book about the design and construction of a floating space city. It contained all kinds of knowledge about the construction of a floating space city. In fact, Su Len thought that this book should be renamed A Step-by-Step Guide to Building a Floating Space City. Of course, Su Len was exaggerating. After all, the knowledge in this book was still very profound. Legendary wizards basically could not understand it. However, as long as they could learn this knowledge, building a floating space city was still possible. Of course, this also required a huge amount of manpower, material resources, and financial support. After all, a floating space city with a capacity of 5,000 people was completely different from a floating space city with a capacity of 100,000 people. Su Len was planning to build a floating space city. Now that he had this book, he could start building it. As for the last book, The Principle and Application of Energy, it also made Sullen's eyes light up. This book recorded the theory and information of the operation and application of various spells and energy. Originally, Su Len thought that it was an academic research book, but after flipping through it, he realized that it was a killer book.
For example, it was equivalent to the relationship between nuclear physics and atomic bombs in his previous life.
To put it simply, the most famous knowledge in this book was the mana particle railgun. The killer weapon of the North Wind Tower was one of the products of this book. Hathaway and Su Len spent a lot of effort when making this item. The railgun was an early product.
From the appearance of this weapon to the destruction of the Arcane Empire, this mana particle railgun had undergone several generations of updates. The power of the mana particle railgun in the North Town was about the 10th circle according to the calculation of the spell circle. In the most glorious period of the Arcane Empire, the power of the latest generation of mana particle railgun had reached the 12th circle spell level. Of course, even in the era of the Arcane Empire, this level of spell was strictly forbidden to be released in the material plane. Such powerful power would cause very serious damage to the material plane, and the damage might even be irreparable. Chapter 650. So far, there was no defensive spell that could withstand a 12-circle spell attack. Even the most powerful enigma of the Arcane Empire couldn't do it. This kind of power was developed by the Arcanists to deal with the gods. However, after the collapse of the Arcane Empire, it had completely disappeared. Now, Sullen's mana particle railgun was very rare. Many wizards suspected that it was the work of the gods because this kind of weapon could threaten the gods. The book that Su Len had now was not the technical information of making the mana particle railgun, but a theoretical book. However, even the theory was very good. The North Wind Tower already had the mana particle railgun. With this perfect theoretical knowledge, as long as Su Len was given time, he could upgrade the mana particle railgun bit by bit. Perhaps it would not reach the level of destruction of the Arcane Empire, but it was still possible to surpass the 10th circle. After understanding the importance of these things, Su Len put all the books away. The value of the knowledge was too amazing. Except for Su Len and Hathaway, no one else had the right to read it. For the next few days, Su Len, Hathaway, and Alex stayed in the laboratory together to study the information and began to discuss the next development of the North Wind Tower. The construction of the floating space city had been put on the agenda. Combined with the information in the book, Su Len finally decided to build a medium-sized floating space city. This kind of floating space city was the largest one that the North Wind Tower could afford now. As for a bigger floating space city,
The Northwind Tower was unable to build it with the resources they had. Of course, when Su Len built the floating space city, he also left room for the floating space city to be upgraded. When he had enough financial resources in the future, he could upgrade the floating space city. Su Len intended to transform the floating space city with the current North City. Although the North City was an ordinary city, Su Len spent a lot of effort during the construction. The city was basically reinforced with hardening. As long as some materials were added in some places, the toughness of the city would completely meet the requirements of the floating space city. This would not only save a lot of resources and money, but it would also reduce the time and energy needed to rebuild the city. In addition, Su Len didn't want to give up the buildings of wonder that he had spent a lot of time and energy to build. Additionally, he couldn't get the materials needed to build the buildings of wonder in a short period of time. He didn't want to give up the magical effects of these buildings of wonder. Therefore, using Northtown City to build a floating city was the best solution. Northern Battlefront City could accommodate 200,000 people. Of course, it was already too big, so Su Len planned to abandon some of the unimportant places. After all, the elemental furnace in the floating city had limited capacity. Unless Su Len was prepared to build another elemental furnace, or if the elemental furnace technology improved, he could create an elemental annihilation furnace that could provide more energy than the elemental fusion furnace. After deciding to build a floating city based on Northern Citadel, the rest was a lot easier. All they had to do was upgrade and modify Northern Citadel according to the standards of a floating city. The laying of various energy channels, as well as the relocation of some buildings and factories, and so on, also needed to be carried out. There was limited space in the floating city, so Su Len needed to make the best use of the limited space he had. Of course, he didn't completely abandon the unimportant buildings and factories. The floating city had limited space, but they could be moved to the demiplane. Su Luen had planned to link the demiplane with the floating city. This demiplane would be the production base of the floating city. Of course, the premise of this was that Su Luen needed to open up the demiplane properly. It took some time to sort out the details of the northern town's renovation work. Milky Way would divide the work among the apprentices. Some of the simple and repetitive tasks would be handled by the apprentices, such as replacing some parts of the city with obsidian and reinforcing them. The apprentices of the Northwind Tower would come in handy. Some of the physical work would be handed over to the golems, such as digging up the underground of Northern Citadel and digging out the energy channels in the city. The work wasn't complicated, but it was a lot of work. The tower spirit could command the golems to do the work, as long as it passed the inspection. Other than that, there were other important tasks that needed Su Len and the others to command. This part wasn't urgent yet. Su Len planned to sort out the work and record the standards for peace, so that they could build according to the standards. After this division of work, Su Len and the others would have a lot less work to do. Since everyone was only given a part of the work, it could be done in secret. Other than Su Len and the others who knew everything, the others only knew a part of it. Many buildings in Northern Citadel needed to be demolished. Even Sullen's palace couldn't avoid it. The palace was still too big. It wouldn't be a problem in a normal city, but in a floating city with limited space resources, it was a complete waste. Su Len didn't want to directly demolish the palace. After all, the money spent was not a small amount. Therefore, he planned to move the entire palace to the outer city. The outer city of Northern Citadel would also be expanded. The construction of the floating city would take a lot of time. Su Len and the others had only sorted out a part of it. The rest of the time would need to be completed as they built it. After the work of the floating city was completed, Su Len and Hathaway started to work on the eyeball of the Evil Eye Tyrant. The eyeball from the Evil Eye Tyrant was the size of a soccer ball. After being treated with a special liquid, the eyeball had started to crystallize. Next, Su Len and Hathaway needed to work on the eyeball together. In order to make a powerful all-seeing eye, many precious resources were needed. Among them, mithril, orichalcum, and star silver sand were indispensable. Fortunately, Su Len still had a lot of stock. In addition, the underground mine had been mining, so it was basically enough to make the all-seeing eye. Even so, they had to be careful. The eye was a very fragile part. Even after being crystallized, it was still the same. Once some small things inside were damaged, Su Len couldn't repair them. Moreover, there was only one eyeball. Once it was damaged, it couldn't be replaced. Under the careful operation of Su Len and Hathaway, the all-seeing eye was made bit by bit. Chapter 651. Sulen, help me deal with the fruit of the ghost flower. Remember to use the cold extraction method. Only the cold extraction method can be used to deal with the evil eye tyrant's eye. Hathaway kept busy on the experiment table and said without raising her head. Don't worry, I won't make a mistake. Sulen nodded. Then, he picked up a sealed box on the experiment table and took out a strange gray fruit. The fruit emitted a cold aura as soon as it appeared. It was as if the temperature of the entire room had dropped by a few degrees. Sulen's hand flashed with light, and then he pointed at the fruit. Then, a cold aura appeared. What was amazing was that this cold aura was controlled in a very small area. As Sulen kept injecting magic energy, some crystal clear powder was sprinkled on the fruit. Soon, the fruit of the ghost flower began to change. The fruit quickly started to melt. In just a few seconds, the fruit of the ghost flower turned into a pool of blue liquid. Hathaway, here you go. Sulen used a glass rod to stir the liquid evenly and handed it to Hathaway. Hathaway reached out and took it. She casually cast a spell to examine it. The quality is not bad. Looks like you've improved. Of course, I'm a genius. Sulen said proudly. Hee. Hathaway rolled her eyes at Sulen. Then, she picked up the liquid. Then, a light flashed. Then, the liquid flew up under the control of a spell. Then, it slowly enveloped the eyeball of the evil eye tyrant. Sulen and Hathaway were making the omniscient eye. As the main body of the evil eye tyrant's eye was of high quality, the two of them were very careful in order to maximize the effect. Fortunately, Hathaway's skills were superb. After the two of them worked hard, the eyeball of the evil eye tyrant was finally dealt with. Sulen and Hathaway looked at each other and smiled as they looked at the omniscient eye floating in the air. All right, I'm finally done. Next, I'll have to test the effects of this omniscient eye. After saying that, the two of them left the laboratory together and headed towards the astrology platform. The omniscient eye could only be used when placed on the astrology platform. Hathaway and Sulen walked all the way to the astrology platform. At this time, the astrology platform had already been modified. In the center of the astrology platform was a stone platform about 1 meter in diameter. The stone platform was engraved with many runes. This was Alex's work for the past few days. This stone platform was specifically used to install the omniscient eye. Hathaway carefully placed the omniscient eye on the stone platform and nodded at the others. You can connect to the energy now, Hathaway said. Then let's test it by connecting to the energy. Okay. Hathaway nodded. She then turned to Eunhee and said, Eunhee, link up with omniscient eye. Accept the mission. Connecting to omniscient eye. Connection successful. Begin the self-check. The self-check is complete. The equipment is normal. Activate. Sulen ordered. Activate omniscient eye. The energy channel is connecting to the energy. Omniscient eye is activating. Initializing process in progress. Please wait. Activation successful. Following the rise of a spiritual light, the omniscient eye slowly lit up. Soon, the crystal-like omniscient eye began to rotate slowly. The runes on the stone platform continuously lit up. Powerful magic waves slowly spread out. Following that, a spiritual light shot up into the sky. The light was not dazzling. This spiritual light directly penetrated the top floor of the astrology tower and went straight into the sky. At the same time, a three-dimensional image appeared on the stone platform. This image was the topographic map of the northern citadel. Looks like we've succeeded. Sulen finally let out a sigh of relief and said with a smile when he saw the image in front of him. Not yet. Although we've successfully activated it, we still haven't seen how high the resolution of the omniscient eye is and how wide its observation range is. Hathaway shook her head and said, I think it's definitely beyond our expectations. Sulen said with a smile. Let's hope so. I'm very nervous now. Hathaway said with a conflicted expression. Don't worry. Even if it doesn't reach our expectations, we've succeeded this time. Sulen walked over and put his arm around Hathaway's shoulder. All right, since we've done what we should do, let's see how it goes. Hathaway nodded and said, Tower Spirit Milky Way. Increase the resolution of the omniscient eye to the maximum. Following Sulen's command, the original three-dimensional image began to change rapidly. In the blink of an eye, The resolution of the three-dimensional image in front of them was increased to the maximum. The image was very clear. The resolution of the image in front of them was shockingly high. It clearly showed a farm outside the northern citadel. Every plant and tree in the farm was extremely clear. Even the ants in the farm could be seen clearly. "This resolution is too high," Hathaway said in surprise when she saw the image in front of her. "This is unbelievable. This thing is too powerful. Let's see what's the limit of its range." After seeing the resolution of the omniscient eye, Sulan was now full of expectations for the range of the omniscient eye. Following Sulan's command, the three-dimensional image in front of them changed again. The image that appeared this time surprised him even more. The three-dimensional image in front of them presented a model that looked like a planet. This model did not show the entire planet. It only showed about 1/5 of the area. The model image was not static. Instead, it was slowly rotating at a certain speed. Seeing this, Sulan understood that this was a three-dimensional image of the planet they were living on. After checking for a while, Sulan finally confirmed that the omniscient eye in front of him could sense up to 3,000 kilometers away. Within this range, the omniscient eye could detect things as small as an ant on the ground. Of course, this level of monitoring could not be used all the time. Although the omniscient eye could observe such a large range, it could detect too much data at once. The omniscient eye could not handle it at all. After checking, they found that if the omniscient eye was used at full power, it could detect up to 50 targets within 3,000 kilometers at once. This number would increase rapidly as the range shrank. If it was a range of 100 kilometers, the omniscient eye could easily detect up to 10,000 targets. Of course, if they wanted to monitor more targets, they would need to install a tower spirit independently of the omniscient eye. This way, the number of targets that the omniscient eye could monitor would increase by a few times or even dozens of times. Chapter 652. Sulan looked at the omniscient eye in front of him with a look of surprise. This thing had given him too many surprises today. After some inspection, he was shocked by the power of the omniscient eye in front of him. This thing was simply a man-made satellite. No, it was more powerful than a man-made satellite. A man-made satellite still needed to be lifted into space, and its lifespan was only a dozen years. It could not monitor invisible objects at all. However, this omniscient eye not only could detect invisible objects, but even the shadows of legendary rogues could not be hidden under it. In addition to these functions, the omniscient eye could also launch an accurate attack. The omniscient eye could launch an energy beam attack with power ranging from the 6th circle to the 9th circle. This energy beam was very fast and accurate. As long as the energy was supplied in time, it could attack targets 3,000 kilometers away. The energy beam was the talent of the evil eye tyrant. Sulan and Hathaway spent a lot of effort when making the omniscient eye, and finally preserved this talent. Now it seemed that it was completely worth it. The omniscient eye in front of him was not its limit. In fact, the platform provided by the Tower of the North Wind was still a little weak. If the omniscient eye was installed on the floating city, then it could really become a satellite. By then, as long as there were 3 omniscient eyes, Sulan could monitor any place in the entire Tyrol world. Of course, Sulan did not intend to do this. He did not intend to dominate the world and become the leader of Tyrol. What was the point of monitoring the whole world? Sulan was not too ambitious. Whether the world was peaceful or not, it had nothing to do with him. As long as there was no problem with his territory, it was fine. And even if he spent a lot of effort to take down the surrounding countries, what would he do? Spend a lot of time and effort to fight with the nobles for the welfare of the masses? He was not that great. After all, before he crossed over, Sulan was just a small citizen. He was not a revolutionary. He was not interested in promoting the development of civilization in this world. If he really did that, he would be the enemy of all the nobles in the world. Even those professions, wizards, and churches would oppose him. In this world with a true god, even the powerful arcane kingdom had been destroyed. His small body couldn't bear it. Omniscient eye. Advanced legendary creation. Material, evil eye tyrant eye. Mithril. Orichalcum. Galaxy silver sand. Effect. Can monitor an area of 3,000 kilometers, and can also use ray attacks. Vision range plus 50, attack range plus 50, stealth detection plus 50, nowhere to hide plus 50, indestructible plus 35, energy conservation plus 45, energy monitoring plus 50. Evaluation. This is a powerful eye that can observe every movement within 3,000 kilometers. Note: it is forbidden to use it to peek at beautiful women. After the installation of the omniscient eye, the safety level of the North Wind Tower was once again raised to a higher level. When the Wizard Tower was first built, the challenge level of the Wizard Tower was about level 18. Later, it reached level 20 after some improvements. After several upgrades, and finally after obtaining the Magic Breaker Golem Puppet and the Golem Army, the challenge level of the North Wind Tower reached level 27, which was already a very high level. Now, with the Omniscient Eye, the challenge level of the North Wind Tower was infinitely close to level 30. After completing the Omniscient Eye, Su Len and Hathaway did not have any free time. Instead, they became busier. The blueprint of the floating space city had been prepared. The next step was to start the transformation of Northtown City. Su Len and Hathaway once again returned to the laboratory. They still had a lot of work to do. They had not only obtained one eye from the Evil Eye Tyrant, but there were also dozens of secondary eyes. Although these secondary eyes could not be used to create the Omniscient Eye, they were very suitable for creating the Scout Eye. These Scout Eyes could be carried around. After activating them, the user would enter a state of advanced stealth. The Scout Eyes could fly and transmit the surrounding scene. Because it used advanced stealth, even ordinary legendary figures would not be able to detect it. It could be said that it was very useful. Compared to the Omniscient Eye, the Scout Eyes were much cheaper. Of course, even without the Scout Eyes, the total price was still very high. It was basically not much less than the Omniscient Eye. These Scout Eyes could also fly, and they moved very quickly. As long as they were fully charged, this batch of Scout Eyes could work continuously for a week. During this time, they could easily transmit information and monitor the surrounding environment. These Scout Eyes were made to deal with the environment in the wild or other planes. The crafting of these Scout Eyes was much simpler than the Omniscient Eye. Su Len and Hathaway did not have much difficulty making them. It took them a few days to complete all the secondary eyes of the Evil Eye Tyrants. These Scout Eyes were divided equally between the two of them. Of course, some of them were given to others to use. After confirming the blueprint, the Northern Citadel became very busy. Every day, a large number of workers were working under the command of the wizard apprentices. The original city walls of the inner city had also been removed. Teams of kobolds were digging under the whip of the kobold supervisors. Su Len had already marked the space under the Northern Citadel in the blueprint. There were a lot of tunnels above and connecting points. A lot of things needed to be excavated. In order to upgrade the Northern Citadel into a floating city, the first problem to be solved was the underground connection of the city. These connections needed to be disconnected from the ground when the floating city ascended into the sky. Moreover, these tunnels needed to be dug very carefully. According to the requirements of the floating city, the city needed to be separated from the ground in the end. Therefore, the excavation of the underground had to be done carefully. If they dug carelessly, it was very likely that the Northern Citadel would collapse in the end. The excavation of the underground world needed a good plan. It could not be done carelessly. In addition, there were a lot of pipelines that needed to be laid in the Northern Citadel. Groups of iron golems were being transported back. These golems were the most powerful labor force in the Northern Citadel. After digging the trenches according to the blueprint, the golem army followed the requirements. Su Len then returned to the mystery plane. The floating city needed a lot of magic crystals. Su Len came this time to check on the growth of the crystal beasts. These crystal beasts could produce magic crystals endlessly. It was a good time to use them on the floating city. Chapter 653. The renovation of the northern town city was going smoothly, but the amount of work this time was quite large, so it might take a long time. Building a floating city required a large amount of magic crystals, and the magic crystals of the Northern Wind Tower were all produced by the crystal beasts. After a long period of reconstruction, about 80% of the secret mirror had been repaired, and all the medicine fields had been restored. Now, many of the resources in the Northern Wind Tower were supplied by the secret mirror. In addition to supplying the Northern Wind Tower, some of the resources in the secret mirror would be sold. The ancient wisdom tree in the secret mirror was thriving. This tree had a plant domain so it could change the environment around it. All kinds of magical plants in the medicine fields would grow better. The production of the secret mirror was enough to support the development of the Northern Wind Tower. Since he had decided to build a floating city, Su Len decided to expand the Northern Wind Academy. Now there were less than 100 wizards and apprentices in the Northern Wind Tower, which was not enough to support a floating city. Although most of the floating city could be operated by the Tower Genie, if it wanted to continue to prosper, it needed a sufficient population. In order to recruit more apprentices, Su Len asked Phyllis to issue an order in San Felto City to recruit apprentices in the entire Kingdom of Florence. All children, including slaves, commoners, and nobles. As long as they were 12 years old and passed the qualification test, they could join the Northern Wind Academy. Most of the population in the Northern Wind Duchy were immigrants from other places, so the population structure was very abnormal. There were basically no old people, and the number of children was pitifully small. However, the Kingdom of Florence was different. The population of the Kingdom of Florence was estimated to be about 10 million, and the number of children in this population was at least 1 or 2 million. Excluding those who were younger or older, there would be about 1 million. According to the 1 in 1,000 probability, these people could recruit almost 1,000 apprentices. Although it was still not enough to meet the requirements of the floating city, this was the best way for now. As for finding other wizard organizations for help, when the time came, would he still have the final say in the floating city? Su Len could also recruit a large number of wandering wizards into the academy. Of course, these wandering wizards would not have any sense of belonging to the Northwind Tower, and they would cause a lot of problems. However, for the sake of the academy's normal operation, Su Len could only accept it for now. However, this situation could not continue for too long. In a few years, the first batch of sorcerer apprentices of the Northern Wind Academy would have successfully become sorcerers. After a few more years, there would be quite a few sorcerer apprentices who would become sorcerers. They would become the backbone of the Northern Wind Academy. It was not easy to recruit wandering wizards. Su Len had to pay real money. After all, wizards believed in equivalent exchange. Fortunately, the secret realm where the abomination was sealed was now being developed. With 2 secret realms, the North Wind Academy could still support a large wizard organization. Su Len even planned to set up a wizard market near North Town for trading purposes. A wizard market would bring in a lot of income every year, and there would also be a variety of rare magic items circulating. This was very important to the Northwind Tower. After thinking for a while, Su Len decided to set up a wizard market. He intended to give this task to Karina and Chris. One of them was a legendary succubus, and the other was a 4th-grade sorcerer. Using them to set up a wizard market was like using sledgehammers to crack a nut. After being busy for 3 to 4 months, these things finally came to an end. The wizard market was almost built, and it would not take long before it could be used. The matter of recruiting sorcerer apprentices was also almost completed. Regarding the recruitment of sorcerer apprentices by the North Wind Academy, the people of the Kingdom of Florence were all scrambling like ducks. One must know that this was a great opportunity. As long as they successfully passed the test, no matter what they were originally, they would get a new identity and rewards. In order to prevent some nobles from obstructing, Su Len specially ordered that anyone who obstructed in any way would be punished by the North Wind Academy. More than 1 million children were distributed in hundreds of large and small cities. The North Wind Academy spent a lot of time and money to recruit more than 20 wandering sorcerers. Coupled with the hundreds of sorcerers supported by the Stellar Spire, this task was finally completed. In the end, the North Wind Academy recruited 1136 sorcerer apprentices from the Kingdom of Florence. These sorcerer apprentices would all enter the academy to study in the near future. Next, the North Wind Academy would become very busy. At the same time, this place would become full of vitality. At the same time, Su Len also received another piece of good news. There was new progress in the research of the elemental fusion furnace. Originally, the theory of the elemental fusion furnace was very complete. Later, after the completion of the elemental fission furnace, the research of elemental fusion would also be promoted. Now, the elemental fusion furnace finally had some results, but it still needed some materials. According to Hathaway, it needed a special kind of lava crystal. This kind of lava crystal was very rare in the material plane, and only a small amount was produced in the Doomsday Volcano in the west of the continent. For the research of the elemental fusion furnace, Su Len planned to go to the west of the continent. Before leaving, Su Len told Hathaway, "It will take me at least 3 months to go to the west of the continent, even half a year. During this time, you must guard the North Wind Spire. You must be careful. The safety of the North Wind Spire is the priority. Don't worry, we will take good care of this place," Hathaway said seriously. By the way, the cooperation with the Stellar Spire should also be accelerated. Once the monsters of the ancient seal appear in the northern wilderness, you must be careful to deal with them. If you can't handle it, let me know. I will rush back as soon as possible. Although the transmission array on the floating space tower could not transmit to anywhere at will, with Sullen's cooperation, it could still open a temporary portal to return to the North Town. The continent where Su Len was now located was very large, equivalent to the area of Europe, Asia, and Africa combined in his previous life. Even so, it was not the largest continent in the world. But even so, it was already very large.
There were more than 200 countries of various sizes living on this continent, and the Doomsday Volcano was in the westernmost part of the continent.
Su Len had to cross the entire continent to reach the Doomsday Volcano. On this vast continent, not all places were suitable for human survival. The Death Desert, the Impassable Swamp, the Dark Mountain Range, and so on were basically inaccessible due to the harsh environment or other reasons. It was said that there were powerful magic beasts living in these places, and their strength was not inferior to the dragon. Chapter 654. Su Len rode the Pegasus to the west. This time, in addition to looking for lava crystals, Su Len also planned to travel.
You should know that the world is still very big, and there are always things that you are interested in.
The different customs and specialties between different countries interested Su Len. Su Len needed to cross the Sea of Death to go to the west of the continent. In his previous life, Su Len also liked to read, but because of work and embarrassment, he could only write books. Now that he had the opportunity to travel the continent, Su Len would not let it go. Along the way, he passed through the northern wilderness, Florence, Lorenza, and entered the territory of the Desert Kingdom.
From the Desert Kingdom, he went all the way through the vast mountains to the kingdom of the mountain dwarves.
The mountain dwarves and grey dwarves were cousins, but the relationship between them was very bad. Although it was not as good as the relationship between the elves and the drows, it was not much better. These dwarves also liked to drink, and their manners were rude, but they were very hospitable. Of course, the premise was that you could become friends with them. After a month of travel, Su Len finally arrived at the west of the continent. At this time, the west of the continent was not very peaceful. Several countries around it were at war.
There were also several wizard organizations here, and the war between these countries was controlled by these wizard organizations.
The specific reason was that there was a magic gem mine at the border of these countries. This kind of magic gem mine was very valuable. In addition to magic gems, there were also a lot of other magic materials. The value of these materials was very high. Several wizard organizations found this place one after another. Every wizard organization wanted to take this mine in their hands, but until now, they had not succeeded. After a month of continuous travel, although he did not feel tired physically, he was a little tired mentally. So Su Len planned to go to the wizard market nearby to rest and take a stroll. Su Len took out a map and looked at it. The nearest wizard market should be the town of Lodo. The town of Lodo was a wizard market under the White Raven Academy. The White Raven Academy was also a large wizard organization. The two small countries around it were their territory. It could be said that the White Raven Academy had the most wizards around. According to the markings on the map, Su Len finally arrived at a town built at the foot of a mountain after traveling for more than 30 kilometers. Is this Luo Duo town? Sullen's eyes moved slightly, and then he lightly knocked on the horse's belly. The heaven horse snorted, and then walked towards the small town. As soon as he got close to the adept town, Su Len could clearly feel that the concentration of elemental energy around him had increased significantly. There should be a runic circle set up in this town to gather the elemental energy around here. The main purpose of this market was to rent rooms for wandering adepts from other countries. At the same time, it was also a large-scale material trading market. When Su Len entered the market, he found that there were thousands of people living in this small town. Some of them were wizards or wizard apprentices, while the rest were wizard servants and handymen. They were responsible for all kinds of manual labor such as cleaning and carrying. Wizards also needed large amounts of magic materials for their training. Since the elemental energy was thin in ordinary places, it was best to find a place with dense magic energy to train. One had to admit that the White Raven Academy was quite bold. They had spent so much to build a runic circle in this town. Many wizards were willing to live in this town. Sir, is this your first time in Luo Duo town?
As soon as Su Len entered the town, a figure came up to him and said. He turned his head and saw a young man in his 20s looking at him with a smile on his face.
Sir, I've been in this market for more than 10 years. I'm very well informed about this place. I basically have all the information you want. Sullen's heart skipped a beat, and he threw a low-quality magic crystal to the young man. The young man took the ransom and wiped it with excitement on his face. After that, he carefully kept it. This young man was also a wizard, but he looked a little down. In fact, most wandering adepts did not have a good life. After putting away the magic crystal, the young wizard began to introduce the general situation of this town. Sir, are you here for the gem mine? Gem mine? Sulen frowned and asked casually. Tell me about it. These countries were all here for the gem mine. It was said that this gem mine was originally hidden in a secret realm. After a long time, the wizard organization had basically disappeared, leaving only a broken secret realm. It was said that this secret realm was quite well preserved. He didn't know if there were any precious materials left behind in this secret realm. It was said that these countries were not fighting because of the gem mine, but because some information left behind by the wizard organization was found in this secret realm. No one knew who took it. Under the guidance of this wizard, Sulen wandered around the market. In the end, he did not find anything. Although there were a lot of resources here, most of them were in the northern city. He wanted to buy something else, but he did not find anything. After staying in Luo Duo town for 3 days, Sulen continued to move west. Maybe because the war between these wizard organizations was a bit fierce, it attracted the attention of other wizard organizations. He did not have any problems crossing these countries. After a week, Sulen finally arrived at the next wizard market. This place was not far from the Doomsday Mountain Range. After coming here again, Su Luan went directly to the Wizard Bazaar. If he wanted the lava spar, he might find it here. This place was very close to the Doomsday Mountain Range. All kinds of magical beasts often ran out of the Doomsday Mountain Range. This market could also be said to be an outpost against the Doomsday Mountain Range. Maybe because the war between these wizard organizations was a bit fierce, it attracted the attention of other wizard organizations. He did not have any problems crossing these countries. After a week, Sulen finally arrived at the next wizard market. This place was not far from the Doomsday Mountain Range. After coming here again, Su Luan went directly to the Wizard Bazaar. If he wanted the lava spar, he might find it here. This place was very close to the Doomsday Mountain Range. All kinds of magical beasts often ran out of the Doomsday Mountain Range. This market could also be said to be an outpost against the Doomsday Mountain Range. Maybe because the war between these wizard organizations was a bit fierce, it attracted the attention of other wizard organizations. He did not have any problems crossing these countries. Chapter 655. The war between the Arcane Kingdom and the gods swept through many planes of the multiverse. Many planes were seriously damaged because of the war. The Terrera plane was relatively better. At least there was no death in that plane. It was many times better than the Doomsday Setting Sun plane. According to the few words passed down by some astral world explorers, the Doomsday Setting Sun plane was almost collapsing. The whole plane was full of endless yellow sand. Only a few people were struggling to survive in the remaining oases. It was a desperate world. The plane barrier had become broken. If there were no accidents, the plane would completely die in a few hundred years at most. Su Len entered the Doomsday Mountains. He bought the map in his hand at the last wizard fair. The map not only marked the topographic map of the Doomsday Mountains, the surrounding cities, but also several other wizard fairs nearby. According to the mark on the map, Su Len went to the nearest active volcano. According to the record, the active volcano had just erupted less than a year ago. The Doomsday volcano was damaged because of the war between the Arcane Kingdom and the gods. The magma in the core of the volcano became very active. The mountains were very unstable. Earthquakes or volcanic eruptions often occurred. And for unknown reasons, the temperature of the magma in the volcano was astonishingly high. The magma was generally more than a few thousand degrees. The environment was very bad, but there were also a large number of magic creatures living there. Because of the abundant energy and the harsh environment, the magic creatures living there were generally very strong. Although it was very dangerous, a large number of wizards and adventurers came here every year to search for treasures. There were a large number of magic creatures here. Several wizard organizations around the area had set up wizard fairs here to buy and trade various materials in the Doomsday Mountains. Su Len rode the Pegasus all the way into the Doomsday Mountains. As soon as he arrived, Su Len felt that the surrounding temperature had risen by at least 10 degrees. The environment was very dry and hot. The air was filled with the smell of sulfur. The Pegasus ran as if it was running on flat ground. Some fire lizards that were looking for food were scared into the crevices of the rocks. The sky looked gray, as if it was covered with a layer of gauze. The thorny bushes on the ground were malevolent and deformed, like the claws of a devil. The Pegasus snorted and shook its head. It was obvious that it did not like this environment. The Heaven Horse's speed was very fast, and even in this environment, its speed did not decrease. After running for about half a day, Su Len saw his destination this time, the volcano that had just erupted. At this time, there was a thick layer of volcanic ash around the volcano. The cooling magma made the place look very desolate. The lava crystal that Su Len was looking for was produced here, but it was very rare. When they arrived near the volcano, the surrounding temperature became even higher. The volcano that had stopped erupting was still emitting black smoke, and the surrounding air was very turbid. There was even a large amount of poisonous gas mixed in. It could be said that the environment here was very similar to the fire elemental plane. When they arrived near the volcano, Su Len asked the Heaven Horse to find a place to play by itself. He then went to the mouth of the volcano. Although the volcanic eruption was very dangerous, it could also bring a lot of opportunities. There were all kinds of metal minerals and magic gems in the solidified magma. Many wizards and adventurers would risk their lives to collect them. Because of the eruption of the magma, these things or enchanted materials were often buried very shallow, so it was much easier to find them. Su Len spread out his powerful power of the will and entered the solidified magma to search. All kinds of enchanted materials and magic gems were obviously different from the magma when the power of the will scanned. As long as they were not buried too deep, a wizard could quickly find these things. Soon, it took Su Len 10 minutes to search the area carefully. In the end, he only found a few natural gold nuggets. He did not find a single magic gem. Su Len was already mentally prepared for this situation. After changing to another place, he began to search again. As time passed, the sky quickly darkened. After an afternoon of searching, Su Len searched the surrounding area, but he did not find much. Only 2 peanut-sized magic gems were found, and nothing else. Seeing that the sky was getting dark, Su Len did not continue his journey. Instead, he found a hidden area and prepared to camp. For wizards, camping in the wild was very convenient, especially for high-grade wizards. Su Len gently waved his arm, and a ray of light rose. Then, a spatial crack suddenly appeared in front of him. Sullen's Magic Mansion. The original version of this spell was the level 7 spell, Mansion. Su Len modified this spell and rebuilt a luxurious mansion, increasing the casting difficulty and mana consumption. After completing the spell, Su Len brought the Pegasus into the mansion, and the spatial crack disappeared without a trace. For more than a month, Su Len basically spent his time in his mansion. He even left a clay golem in the mansion as a servant. Although it was only a low-grade golem, the intelligence of this golem was not inferior to that of a steel golem. It was completely made according to the template of a butler. The only regret was that this golem was very bad at cooking. In the next few days, Su Len began to search in the Doomsday Mountains. Unfortunately, he searched several volcanoes in a row, but he did not find the lava crystal. Fortunately, he also obtained some magic gems and enchanted materials. At least his efforts were not in vain. After a few days of fruitless searching, Su Len planned to go to the surrounding wizard bazaars to try his luck. The production of lava crystals was very low, and there might be some in the wizard bazaar here. He rode the Pegasus to the nearest wizard bazaar. What surprised him was that the wizard bazaar in front of him was actually a small town. Looking at the scale, there were at least tens of thousands of people living in it. It was the first time Su Len had seen a wizard bazaar of such a scale. Of course, although there were tens of thousands of people, there were not many wizards inside. Most of them were ordinary people who served the wizards. Outside the wizard bazaar, a powerful barrier was set up. According to Sullen's estimation, this barrier was at least at the legendary level. After entering the bazaar, Su Len did not delay and directly found dozens of the largest shops, Alice's Magic Hut. This magic shop was a shop of a large wizard organization nearby, the Fairies' Garden. There were many enchanted materials inside. This fairies' garden was said to have the bloodline of fairies. It was a typical wizard organization with both warlocks and wizards, and its strength was not bad. Chapter 656. Welcome. Su Len stepped into the shop. As soon as he entered, a pretty apprentice greeted Su Len respectfully. "What can I do for you, my lord?" One of the witch apprentices said with a sweet smile and invited Su Luen in. This sorcerer apprentice had a gorgeous appearance. Her skin was fair, her body was slender, and her ears were pointy. It was obvious that she was a sorcerer apprentice with fairy blood running through her veins. Generally speaking, there were very few witches among the sorcerers who were ugly. They were all very beautiful. Sorcerers had many different abilities. Even if they were originally ugly, there were too many ways to change them after becoming a sorcerer. Therefore, there were basically no ugly sorcerers. "Do you have lava crystals for sale here?" Su Len asked directly. "Lava crystal, huh? It just so happens that we received one 2 days ago. Please take a rest, sir. I'll go inform the manager." As she spoke, the apprentice smiled at Su Len. That smile looked very charming, and even Su Len felt a trace of heat rise in his heart. However, Su Len quickly frowned. Charm? She really does have fairy blood. Looking at the apprentice's figure swaying as she left, Su Len instantly reacted. This witch was born with the ability to charm people, using charm to attract customers. No wonder her business is getting bigger and bigger. Su Len shook his head inwardly. Soon, a series of footsteps sounded. Then, a fatty who looked to be in his 40s walked in with a smile on his face. This fatty had a broad body and looked harmless. However, if one looked closely, they would find that a trace of shrewdness flashed through his eyes from time to time. "Sir, you look unfamiliar. Most likely, you came from outside the Doomsday Mountains." "Sir, you have good eyesight," Su Len said calmly. "I did come from another city and wanted to buy a few pieces of lava crystals. However, when I came here, I realized that lava crystals are not easy to buy." "Haha, there are no restrictions on ordinary magic items. However, I think that kind of rare information is rarely sold even here," the manager said with a smile. "It just so happens that we still have one left." The manager waved at the apprentice next to him. The apprentice walked forward and placed a box on the table. "We just received it. You can take a look at it first." "Please." Su Len picked up the box and opened it. As soon as he opened the box, he was greeted by a wave of heat. The temperature of the room instantly increased by several degrees. Inside the box was a red magic crystal that was slightly smaller than an egg. It was the lava crystal. Su Len gently picked up the lava crystal. It was warm and comfortable to the touch. There was a scorching energy within the lava crystal. After checking it again, Su Len frowned slightly and put the lava crystal down in disappointment. "I'm sorry, but this lava crystal is not what I need," Su Len said as he slowly put down the lava crystal. "Do you have any other lava crystals in your shop? The quality of this lava crystal does not meet the requirements." Su Len asked. "I'm sorry, sir. We only have this one lava crystal now," the manager said helplessly. "Ah." Su Len was a little disappointed. He could not help but ask, "Sir, please tell me where you can sell lava crystals." The manager poured a cup of black tea for Su Len and said, "Although Mount Doom is rich in all kinds of magic materials, the production of lava crystals is still very low. It's even rarer to get high-quality lava crystals." Hearing the manager's words, Sullen's heart began to sink slowly. "However, it's not like there aren't any." The manager smiled and continued, "Precious magic materials like this usually only appear in auctions and Magus trade fairs. If you're lucky enough, you'll definitely be able to find the lava crystal you're looking for. The auction is held about once every 10 years, and the Magus trade fairs are held once every 5 years. This time, it's held at another Magus market. If you want to participate, you'll have to go to Casa Magus town." Coming out of Alice's magical hut, Su Len frowned. He then took out a sheepskin map and looked at it. Mount Doom stretched for tens of thousands of miles. Naturally, there was more than one Magus market here. The mountains here were connected, and there were volcanoes erupting almost every day. These volcanoes were of different sizes. The small ones were only the size of a bowl, and the big ones could easily contain a city. The Mount Doom was rich in resources. Many Magus organizations had set up their bases here. Casa Magus Market. Su Len looked at the marked location on the map. His expression changed slightly. He rode on his Pegasus and rushed directly to Casamagas town. According to the manager's information, the start of the trade fairs was very close. Casamagas town was also very big. It was even more bustling than the town he went to before. According to the manager, every time it was held, magi from all over the world would come to participate. It was said that the number of magi who participated in the trade fairs over the years was no less than 200. Moreover, there were often legendary items that appeared in these fairs. After passing through the town gate, Su Len slowly entered the town.
Before he could observe his surroundings, he heard a voice coming from beside him.
Magus, sir. Su Len looked down and saw a little girl with a dirty face looking at him timidly. A trace of panic flashed in her eyes, but she quickly suppressed it.
After seeing Sulen's gaze, the little girl became very nervous.
Sir, do you need a guide? As if she was too nervous, the little girl's body trembled slightly. A trace of pleading flashed in her eyes. She hesitated for a moment and took back one of her fingers. She said, "Just two. A piece of bread will do." Sulen's heart moved slightly. He took out 2 pieces of bread and a piece of roasted meat from his storage space. He jumped down from his Pegasus and squatted beside her. He looked at her with a smile and said, "How old are you? Why are you here alone?" 8 years old. Grandpa is asleep. I'm hungry. I can only come out to find food. As if she was too nervous, the little girl's body trembled slightly. A trace of pleading flashed in her eyes. She hesitated for a moment and took back one of her fingers. She said, "Just two. A piece of bread will do." Sulen's heart moved slightly. He took out 2 pieces of bread and a piece of roasted meat from his storage space. He jumped down from his Pegasus and squatted beside her. He smiled and said, "How old are you? Why are you here alone?" 8 years old. Grandpa is asleep. I'm hungry. I can only come out to find food. Chapter 657. Su Len sighed in his heart. If he was right, this little girl's grandfather had most likely passed away. Looking at the skinny little girl in front of him, Su Len said softly, "Where is your home? I'll send you home to meet your grandfather first." The little girl hesitated for a moment, then nodded and said. Su Len led the Pegasus and followed the little girl into the town.
Soon, the two of them came to a low and cramped shack area. The people living here were at the bottom of the wizard market. Many ordinary people were unwilling to leave after coming into contact with wizards. They dreamed of becoming a wizard one day. Of course, this was not impossible. There were people who were tested to have the potential to be a wizard. In the end, they were accepted as an apprentice by a wizard organization and became a wizard. However, most people only had wishful thinking. The little girl stopped outside a dilapidated wooden house, and then pushed open the crumbling door. The house was very small, and the light was dim. As soon as Su Len entered, he smelled a faintly discernible rancid smell.
"Grandpa, Nini is back. She also brought back delicious food. Grandpa, don't sleep. Eat some." The little girl walked to the bed and shook it twice, but her grandfather did not move. Su Len sighed in his heart. He saw very clearly that the old man on the bed had been dead for a long time. There were even many liver mortis spots on his thin body. "Grandpa, don't ignore Nini. Nini will be obedient. Grandpa, try it. This bread is very fragrant, and this barbecue is delicious. Eat it and you won't be hungry anymore." "Grandpa," Su Len walked forward, squatted down and patted the little girl's head. "Nini, your grandpa is asleep. Eat these things yourself." "But Grandpa hasn't eaten for a few days," Nini said hesitantly. "Grandpa is already asleep. He doesn't need these things. Next, we need to find a place for him to sleep." Looking at the confused little girl, Su Len explained. Next, Su Len spent some kinner to find a few workers to help the little girl bury her grandpa. Then, he left the alley. After seeing this, Nini seemed to understand something in her heart and silently followed Su Len. After arranging the funeral of Nini's grandpa, Su Len came to a rented house under her lead. There was still some time before the trade fair, so he needed to stay here for a while. Su Len rented a separate house, which was specially prepared for wizards. Not only did it have all kinds of living facilities, but it also had an independent laboratory for experiments. After everything was done, Su Len thought and asked, "Nini, Have you tested for aptitude? Testing for aptitude. The little girl shook her head and said shyly. Then I'll test for you. Su Luan smiled and took out a crystal ball from his storage space that was used to test the aptitude of a magus. Put your hand on it and focus.
The little girl hesitated for a moment, then shyly put her hand on the crystal ball under Sullen's encouraging gaze.
Close your eyes and focus, Su Len said with a smile. After seeing Sullen's smile, the little girl nodded and closed her eyes. After about half a minute, there was no reaction from the crystal ball. Just when Su Len thought that the little girl did not have the aptitude to become a wizard, a light slowly lit up from the crystal ball. Then, the light became brighter and brighter, until it lit up the entire room. In this light, there were some blue, red, and green lights. After a while, these lights gradually disappeared. It's done, Su Len said with a smile. The little girl looked at Su Len in confusion. She's a 5th grade aptitude. Su Len looked at Nini with a face full of surprise. The 5th grade aptitude was the classification of the aptitude of wizards. The 5th grade aptitude was the highest, and the 1st grade aptitude was the lowest. Because Su Len had the system, when he tested himself, he was a 5th grade aptitude. However, this did not mean that there were many 5th grade aptitudes. Among the more than 1,000 apprentices in the Northern Wind Academy, most of them were 3rd grade aptitudes. There were only 2 4th grade aptitudes in the entire academy, and not a single one was 5th grade. In the Northern Wind Tower, only Hathaway and Su Len had 5th grade aptitudes. The other one was Alex. However, she was a divine creature. After fusing with her divinity, her aptitude was not inferior to a 5th grade aptitude, or even stronger. He did not expect that after a long trip, he would suddenly show some kindness and take in a little girl with 5th grade aptitude. The aptitude of a wizard was very important in the early stages. A 5th grade aptitude could meditate and advance quickly. As long as there were no problems, becoming a 4th grade wizard was not a problem. It was much better than those 1st grade or 2nd grade apprentices. Many apprentices who only had 1st grade or 2nd grade aptitudes could not even touch the threshold of a high-grade wizard in their entire lives. As for becoming a legendary wizard, it was not a matter of aptitude. There was also a little bit of luck. After becoming a legendary wizard, aptitude was no longer important. At this time, aptitude was more important.
In other words, as long as one had 5th grade aptitude, as long as they continued to practice, they would definitely become a high-grade wizard.
The little girl looked at Su Len with a nervous expression. As someone who lived in the wizard market, she naturally knew about the aptitude test. After seeing that the test was over, she looked at Su Len with a nervous expression. Su Len smiled and squatted down to the same height as her. Then he said, Nini, what is your name? My name is Nini.
The little girl looked at Su Len with a strange expression.
Su Len smiled and pinched her little face. Nini is a nickname. You still need a formal name. A formal name?
The little girl tilted her head and looked at Su Len.
Then she shook her head.
Then I'll give you one, Su Len said with a smile.
Okay. How about Vinia? Her nickname is Nini. Su Len said. Vinia. I'll be called Vinia from now on. Nini said happily. She was obviously very satisfied with this name. After adopting Vinia, it could be said that from today onwards, her fate would be completely different. If she did not meet Su Len, the little girl would very likely have died in some corner of this wizard market. Even if she had 5th grade aptitude, if no one knew, there would be no change. Su Len planned to send the little girl to the Northern Wind Academy to study. She was still young and could slowly build her foundation. With the guidance of so many wizards, as long as there were no accidents, she would definitely become a legendary wizard.